Chapter 968. The other snake heads hissed at the same time. Their yellow tongues moved in and out. They opened their mouths and bit at Li Qingshan like mountains. Break, 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 break. Li Qingshan bellowed out repeatedly. The four snake heads basically collapsed at the same time, like the collapse of a mountain, revealing a dark red fracture. Demon blood surged out violently, spraying into the air like a downpour. The kings of Yin and Yang silently arrived behind Li Qingshan. Suddenly, they opened their mouths, but no sound came out. The demonic sound had already surpassed the limits of hearing, becoming silent and undetectable. It surged towards Li Qingshan faster than the speed of sound. Li Qingshan's figure twisted and dissipated in the demonic sound. Afterimage? Yin-Yang Lord's eyes popped out in disbelief. As demon kings, they could only see afterimages. A red bolt of lightning tore through the sky. It was a blood-red blade aura. It streaked across the sky and left behind a zigzag trail. Without any warning, the huge snake heads broke off and fell into the swamp. A loud rumble resounded, and muddy water filled the air. The red lightning paused and revealed Li Qingshan. He sucked in a deep breath, and the wings of wind and fire on his back unfurled to several hundred meters. His blood surged like it was about to be set alight. He swung his blade at the nine-headed king's final head. Hiss hiss. It's useless. I admit you're strong, but it's useless. This is your best. But it's still far from. Boom. The snake heads turned into minced meat. Li Qingshan retracted his fist and bathed in demonic blood. Nine-headed king's voice came from behind him again. Not enough. The snake head that had been shattered by his shout grew back again. Mountains rose up one after another. Those were the snake heads of the nine-headed king. They opened their mouths at the same time, and their voices reverberated through the mountains. You can't kill me. I'm the real nine-headed snake here. Although the nine-headed king had some of the Hydra's bloodline, and his life force and recovery ability were very strong, he would not die as long as he did not destroy all of his snake heads, but he was not a real Hydra after all. The power of the demon heart was limited, and the snake heads could not grow continuously. However, in this 12-citadel demon formation of the evil, not only did his vitality and recovery ability increase by a level, but he also had the support of an endless supply of magic power. It was as if he had truly become that legendary unkillable Hydra. How long can you maintain this state? Give up resisting. You won't be able to win. Why don't we put in a good word for you with evil god Cheongqi? Maybe evil god Cheongqi will be magnanimous enough to accept you as one of us. The Yin-Yang Lord's voice suddenly changed. The male voice was filled with magnetism, while the female voice was as gentle as water, filled with bewitchment. However, his heart was filled with vicious killing intent. Cheongqi's order was to kill Li Qingshan, so they definitely could not hold back and leave behind a potential threat like him. He said this because he was shocked by Li Qingshan's strength. At the same time, he could tell that Li Qingshan could not maintain his berserk state for too long. He would definitely fall into a deep state of weakness afterwards, and the corpse poison was currently spreading. As long as Li Qingshan relaxed his battle intent and revealed a sliver of a desire to live, he would be dead for sure. The kings among the Silver Dragon Kings were all sharp-witted, so they could immediately tell that this was a trap. However, as the saying went, the onlooker had a clearer view of the situation. Who wouldn't want to grab onto a life-saving straw when they were in dire straits? The Banyan Tree King even hoped that Li Qingshan would agree to it. Even logically speaking, this was his only chance of survival. If demon god Cheongqi really did favor him, perhaps he might decide to spare his life. However, this was also the possibility that the King of Southern Yu worried about the most. After personally witnessing Li Qingshan's strength, he struggled to imagine just what kind of demon king he would become if he joined the demon domain. Born in this world, he would not be bound by the laws of the world at all. He could leave the demon cavern and roam the world freely. Killing him would be even more difficult than killing 10 demon kings. If he was given sufficient time to grow, he would probably become the master of this new demon domain. Ha 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 ha. Just as they thought about this in particular and became anxious, laughter suddenly erupted. It reached their ears from the distant battlefield. The laughter was so loud and clear that even the 12 citadel demon formation of the ominous could not stop it. Li Qingshan laughed madly as if he had heard some kind of joke. For a moment, the wind and clouds surged, and demon chi surged. His figure rapidly expanded. 3 meters, 30 meters, 300 meters, 1,500 meters, 1,500 meters, he climbed to a height of over 1,000 meters. Just now, he stopped, turning into a towering body of the demonic and divine. With a great rumble, iron hooves stomped the ground. The pair of curved horns on his head almost touched the low-hanging demonic clouds. He was on equal footing with the 12 demon gods around him. The 9-headed king tried her best to straighten her snake head, but she still had to look up at his figure. Compared to his figure, the 9-headed king was no longer a monster that was as large as a mountain, but a strange snake with 9 heads. Use your full strength. Ha ha. A member of you. Ha ha. Li Qingshan's laughter rumbled like thunder, descending from the sky. Suddenly, he shook his arms and extended his tiger claws, revealing his sharpness. The tiger's tail swung behind him, wrapping around a huge, blood-red blade that let out the sound of ripping through the air. Die, all of you. In that instant, Li Qingshan moved. He swung, galloped, and leapt about. He was like a scorching war dance that originated from ancient times. There were no steps or rhythm, only joy from the bottom of his heart. Even if he was clumsy and in a sorry state, he was fighting for survival. The wind danced with the tiger. The roaring wind turned into a wild song that rang through the sky. Li Qingshan's colossal figure blurred, turning into a spinning storm. The sharp claws and blood-red blade aura were like bolts of lightning within the storm. The 9-headed king was originally hesitating about whether she should take advantage of Li Qingshan's enlarged figure to wrap around him and take a few bites, but when she saw this, she retreated madly. However, in the blink of an eye, the storm had already arrived before her. It was unavoidable and unstoppable. No. The 9-headed king let out a despairing cry, merging with the wind perfectly. How could a war song not contain the wails of the enemy? The 9 snake heads were sucked into the storm one after another, reduced to a rain of blood. Even her colossal body was devoured by the storm. Boom! The deafening explosion of the demon heart's self-detonation brought an abrupt end to this violent battle dance. The storm vanished. The king of Southern Yu and the others were all dumbfounded. The sight before them had already surpassed their imaginations. Their hearts thumped heavily, still submerged in the lingering charm of the battle. Yi Wei Yang pursed her lips. What a good man! The demonic clouds were torn apart, and the silver moon shone down like a glorious curtain. Chapter 969. A layer of the swamp had been blown away by the storm, revealing the fresh soil below. It was soaked in the 9-headed king's demon blood. With a gentle breeze, Li Qingshan's scarlet hair danced in the wind. The soil in the distance trembled, and a strange-looking conjoined twins crawled out. They were the kings of Yin and Yang. Li Qingshan glanced at them and could not help but smile. I was looking for you. The kings of Yin and Yang lay on the ground, covered in a few bloody wounds from the wind. They stared at Li Qingshan resentfully, but they struggled to hide their fear. They did not want to face the terrifying storm a second time. If it were not for Chungche's orders, they would not be hiding in the ground. They would have directly fled. Li Qingshan, stop bluffing. You've already lost. Just like last time, we're the final victors. 2 mouths spoke at the same time. The voices of a man and a woman crisscrossed and trembled. Is that so? Li Qingshan's face was as calm as still water. Under the moonlight, his skin was so pale that it was almost transparent. Purplish-black liver mortis spots appeared as yellowish marks spread across his skin. This was the price he had paid to kill the flying zombie king and 9-headed king. Even he could not completely ignore the power of the demon heart's self-destruction. The feeling of weakness after going berserk seeped deep into his bones. Even taking a step seemed rather difficult. Normally, he would not have been so weak, but this was the 12 citadel demon formation of the ominous. If it were not for the support of the strength of the earth and the heart of the abyss, he probably would have collapsed already. However, he slowly raised his blade, and its edge flickered under the moonlight. With a flash, the kings of Yin and Yang suddenly retreated 5 kilometers away, staring at him in fear. The demon king has been scared out of his wits, but is powerless to fight anymore. The king of Southern Yu said with some pity. Just now, the violent power was basically startling. If it were not for the 12 citadel demon formation of the ominous, it would probably be even more terrifying. However, as the saying went, prosperity is bound to decline. The banyan tree king fell silent. Li Qingshan laughed aloud at the sky, but his laughter was filled with weakness. He lowered his blade powerlessly. "I'm too tired. Let's rest up for now." As he said that, he just lay down on his back and gazed at the bright moon through the cracks in the clouds. He said softly, "Brother Ox, how satisfying. Life is not lived in vain. You dare to scare me." The yin-yang lord was furious and flew into the sky. It let out a terrifying demonic roar, but it still maintained a sufficient distance from Li Qingshan. "Bastard, you blocked the moonlight. Forget it, I'll kill you first." As Li Qingshan said that, he continued to lie there without moving. The spirit turtle's profound shell flew out, forming a smooth, mirror-like surface. The demonic sound landed on the surface of the mirror and was reflected back at the yin-yang lord. Puff! The yin-yang king spat out a mouthful of blood and was sent flying. Every inch of his body trembled violently. He could clearly feel how powerful his demonic voice was. This was Li Qingshan's third divine ability, terminal lucidity. It was rather similar to the ox demon's new ability. They were both independent abilities that he already possessed, going from being useless to an ability that could truly stand on its own. However, unlike the ox demon forges its hide, terminal lucidity was more suitable for dealing with techniques, and it could be regarded as both attack and defense. If it were another time and place, this ability might have been able to unleash wondrous effects, but it seemed rather powerless in the current situation. The spirit turtle's abilities had always focused on defense and support. Terminal lucidity. TSK, how inauspicious. Li Qingshan mumbled to himself. He considered whether he should change the name or not. "Is this your trump card? What a pity. I just want to watch you die. Die. Die." The yin-yang lord wiped away the blood from his mouth and looked down at Li Qingshan from above. His 3 bulging eyes were bloodshot as he howled hysterically. A while later, a few more spots of livor mortis appeared on Li Qingshan's body. Even when he powered the spirit turtle's method of C suppression at full strength, he was unable to suppress it. Li Qingshan suddenly took a step back and swung his right arm as hard as he could, tossing out the blade in his hand. It turned into a streak of blood-red light and shot into the sky. "You want to injure me with an attack like that?" The yin-yang lord sneered. Suddenly, light filled his field of vision. The smooth, mirror-like surface of the spirit turtle's profound shell suddenly shifted, reflecting the silvery blue moonlight on his face. He became even more disdainful. "You're still using tricks like that? How pitiful." A hand extended out of the resplendent moonlight, gripping the hilt of Tiger's fang firmly. The yin-yang lord's eyes suddenly widened as if he had seen a ghost. All he saw was Li Qingshan's scarlet hair drifting in the wind. He was brimming with energy. He did not seem injured at all. How is this possible? The yin-yang lord retreated in a hurry, but he had already swung his blade. With the moonlight, he drew a silvery blue arc, hanging in the sky like a crescent moon. The trajectory of the yin-yang lord's retreat just happened to coincide with the crescent moon, as if he had gone up to receive it himself. Moonlight flashed and demonic blood splattered. The yin-yang lord's body split into 2. He widened his eyes, but all he saw was Li Qingshan standing on the ground, staring at him calmly. Meanwhile, the Li Qingshan before him had the same expression, swinging out another crescent moon. What a powerful clone! The king of Southern Yu and the others on the side could clearly see that the second Li Qingshan had flown out of the mirror-like surface that reflected the moonlight. If he were outside, just this clone would possess the strength of a demon king. Yi Duanhai sighed. No, he's even more powerful than regular demon kings. Aren't these 2 demon kings much more powerful than regular demon kings when they fuse? Yi Wei Yang pointed at the battlefield again. "I don't necessarily have to use a new ability to kill you." Li Qingshan smiled. Now this was his true trump card, the second innate ability of the spirit turtle transformation, the water mirror's image. The strength of the mirror clone was directly connected to his original body. After undergoing the tribulation and becoming a demon king, the strength of his clone had increased as well. Coupled with the strengthening of the innate ability itself, the power he could unleash was no weaker than before he underwent the tribulation, even under the suppression of the 12 citadel demon formation of the ominous. Some people might find this strange. Before the tribulation, even when Li Qingshan and Gong Yuan worked together, they were not the opponent of the kings of Yin Yang fused with two demon kings, so how was it possible for him to emerge victorious alone? However, when the same power was controlled by a demon king and a demon commander, the effects would be completely different. The kings of Yin Yang could clearly sense this. The mirror clone's strength was clearly below his, but Li Qingshan seemed to be able to read his thoughts. He could predict his opponent's moves every single time, leaving openings all over his body. With the heart of the abyss in his mouth, Li Qingshan's eyes turned pitch black. He seemed to be staring at the kings of Yin Yang in the sky, but also like he was staring at the endless void. After breaking through to the 5th layer of the spirit turtle transformation, he could see the heavenly secrets and fate with even greater clarity. Although it took a tremendous amount of effort, he could still calculate the kings of Yin Yang's movements, which was enough for his mirror clone to gain the upper hand. However, he did not show any joy at all. The difference in strength was there. The 12 citadel demon formation of the ominous suppressed his mirror clone even more than his original body, or he would have summoned his mirror clone a long time ago. It would have been very difficult for him to deal a fatal strike to the kings of Yin Yang. And, his current state was even more difficult to maintain than the tiger demon's fury, as he had not developed an independent innate ability after all. If only the innate ability the spirit turtle had condensed this time was related to this. However, there were no ifs in life. All he could do was calmly accept his fate. He closed his eyes gently. Already exhausted, even his mind was close to the limit now. Chapter 970. Clang. Tiger Tooth flew back and stabbed into the ground not far from Li Qingshan. Although Li Qingshan had heavily injured the kings of Yin and Yang time and time again with his mirror clone, the vitality of demon kings was powerful, and they were in the 12 citadel demon formation of the ominous too. No matter how heavily injured they were, they could recover rapidly. Meanwhile, the mirror image's power was weakening. The Yin-Yang lords finally regained the upper hand and knocked the saber away. In just a moment, the mirror image collapsed under the echo of the demonic sound. The last trace of hope was extinguished. It was like the afterglow of the setting sun had completely sunk into the deep sea, leaving behind eternal darkness. Li Qingshan's expression was still calm. The livor mortis and turbid yellow spread all over his body and bones. With a loud bang, the Yin-Yang lords landed far away and looked at him with the attitude of a victor. The terrible saber wounds on their bodies were recovering at a visible speed. They laughed sinisterly and said, "Li Qingshan, you lost to me again. How is it? You don't want to accept it, right?" "Wrong." Li Qingshan shook his head lightly. "A win is a win, a loss is a loss. There is nothing to be unconvinced about. Don't be stubborn. Let me give you a quick death." "Sure." Li Qingshan smiled. The Yin-Yang lords took a step forward but stopped. "Do you think I'm so stupid? I'm going to stand here and watch how you die." Even though Li Qingshan looked so weak, as if he could be knocked down with one finger, the Yin-Yang lords still didn't dare to approach him. Li Qingshan smiled. His gaze swept past the Yin-Yang lords and looked in the direction of the 10,000 poison cult. He said in his heart, "Sorry, I have to leave you alone. Cultivate the most ferocious spells, fight the strongest enemies, sleep with the most beautiful women, all the way to the 9 heavens, and stand side by side with Brother Nyo." All of these ambitions would turn into nothingness. However, when he stepped out of that small village and swore never to return, he was already prepared for this. The only regret in his heart was that he couldn't see her again. The Silver Dragon King fell silent. Apart from the Great Banyan Tree King, the other 3 did not have much of a relationship with Li Qingshan. As a matter of fact, they had even clashed with him in the past, but at that moment, they were all in no mood to talk. The banyan tree king clenched his fists tightly. There were a few times when he wanted to attack, but in the end, he let out a long sigh. His original body was over 10,000 kilometers away. With a mere clone, even if he took action, it would be futile. The three kings of Southern you would never take the risk with him. Demonic clouds covered the moon, and the stars dimmed. Suddenly, the pitch-black horizon was illuminated by a white light, as if the sun had broken through the dawn. In the next moment, white flames burned through half the sky. The king of Southern you raised an eyebrow and said in surprise, "Something's approaching, so fast." With a thought, the image on the porthole locked onto a figure within the flames 1,000 kilometers away. She held a shiny bone sword firmly in her hand as her seaweed-like hair drifted about in the flames. Her brows were firmly furrowed, filled with anxiety. Only when she saw his figure did she smile just now. Qingshan. Li Qingshan smiled as well. Even if he died right now, he would have no more regrets. The kings of Yin and Yang were alarmed, but they sneered. Don't celebrate too early. Who do you think is bold enough to come in and save you? With the power of the 12 citadel demon formation of the ominous, anyone who fell into it would struggle to escape death. Even the king of Southern Yu, who rode the Silver Dragon King, was afraid to approach it, let alone others. Li Qingshan did not even glance at the kings of Yin and Yang. He gazed into the distance with a smile. He was not moved, nor would he try to persuade her to turn around and return. To them, living and dying together was only a matter of course. They were willing to spend another moment together, until death do us part. The flames in the sky receded, merging into Little An's body. She turned into a streak of white light and crossed the distance in the blink of an eye, flying over the Silver Dragon King. Under the gazes of the 12 demon gods, she threw herself into the 12 citadel demon formation of the ominous without the slightest hesitation, throwing herself into his arms. Li Qingshan staggered before catching her. You seem to have grown up again. I'm almost unable to carry you anymore. Yeah. Little Ann nodded and stared straight at him. She touched his face with her bare hand and shone with a faint Buddhist glow. Wherever it passed by, the livor mortis and murky yellow were immediately purged, returning him to his normal skin tone. You've also undergone the third heavenly tribulation. Yeah. Very good. Li Qingshan, congratulations on having another person accompany you to the grave, the kings of Yin and Yang said sinisterly. This guy's blabbering is annoying. Hurry up and kill him for me, Li Qingshan grumbled to Little Ann with a grin. All right. Little Ann looked back indifferently. The kings of Yin and Yang's heart skipped a beat. They could not sense any danger or killing intent. There was only emptiness, as if she did not exist. They could not help but feel an indescribable sense of fear. They retreated almost instinctively, only to suddenly feel a pain in their chest. They lowered their heads in disbelief, only to see that the shiny white bone sword had already stabbed into their body. The skull engraved on the hilt was inches away, staring at them with its empty eye sockets. It seemed to be filled with benevolence, but the person who held the sword was expressionless, ignoring everything. There was no dazzling light or sharp sword chi. It was just an ordinary strike, but it seemed to pass through space and time, making it impossible to grasp its trajectory. Even now, the kings of Yin and Yang did not feel like they had actually been stabbed. What path of the sword is this? Yi Duanhai's eyes suddenly narrowed. As a great sword cultivator, he could clearly sense the terror within. The sword was pulled back immediately. It did not even pierce through the kings of Yin and Yang's body. Little Ann returned to Li Qingshan's side, standing there with her sword. After undergoing the third heavenly tribulation, not only had the Buddha-slaying sword turned from a sword embryo into a true sword, but her path of the sword had also finally broken free from the three absolutes calligraphy's shadow, forming a path of the sword that belonged to her. The path of the Buddha-slaying sword. This path of the sword had always existed in the path of white bone and great beauty. However, her cultivation in the past had been too low, so she was unable to comprehend it, let alone practice it. The kings of Yin and Yang retreated another 5 kilometers and stared at Little Ann in fear. This was definitely not an enemy they could deal with. Just what kind of monsters had Cheongchi's trap attracted? They were also confused as to why he did not continue his pursuit. Just when they were about to speak, meaningless gurgling sounds came out of their mouths. Suddenly, they split into two, turning into a male and female demon king. They recovered their normal posture and knelt on the ground, desperately clutching the same wound on their chests. The poison did not spread, nor did the wound expand. It just did not heal, as if it would never heal. What's going on? The two demon kings looked at one another. Their faces were filled with fear and confusion. Who knew how many times the blade had struck him, but it had never claimed his life, let alone a gentle strike like that. This feeling was so familiar, as if they had returned to a very, very long time ago. Back then, they were not powerful demon kings yet, but the weakest demon folk. They struggled to survive in the demon domain, facing death many times. Birth, residence, mutation, and destruction, success, residence, and destruction. Great beauty and white bone, the cycle of life and death, little and recited gently as she stroked her sword. You don't understand, do you? In short, you're already dead. Li Qingshan laughed aloud. Then he asked little Anne, am I right? Yes. Little Anne smiled. With two thuds, the two demon kings collapsed on the ground, dying like mortals. Chapter 971. Two swaying white lotuses rose up from the wounds of the two demon kings. At a closer glance, they were actually two pale white sparks. They suddenly turned into scorching samdi flames of white bone and rushed into the sky, gathering in Little An's hand. He clenched it gently, and the traces of the two demon kings completely vanished. What sword is that? Yi Duanhai stared at the shiny bone sword and was completely shocked. Even if he used his full strength, he was not confident he could kill two demon kings in a single stroke, let alone in the 12 citadel demon formation of the ominous. The sea-splitting sword was a famed sword in the world, but it definitely did not possess such power. Everything that he had seen today was too unimaginable. Sir, I finally believe that Cheongqi has come for them. Just what are their origins? The King of Southern Yu asked in surprise. He was unable to imagine whether he would end up like the two demon kings if that sword landed on him, dying a baffling death. I'm not too sure either. The banyan tree king shook his head gently, but he had a vague guess inside. As it seemed, the dream that Li Qingshan had mentioned in the past was not without reason. This is definitely not a power that should exist in this world, the King of Southern Yu said confidently. Even the 3 graves and 5 classics passed down through the imperial family of the Xia Empire definitely did not possess such power. Now, all the demon kings who had taken part in dealing with Li Qingshan were dead, yet what stood before him was the 12 citadel demon formation of the ominous, as well as the mastermind Cheongqi. Interesting. This is far too interesting. Loud laughter suddenly rang out, echoing through the surroundings and making everyone's expressions change. It was Cheongqi's voice. Sure enough, he had been paying attention to this the entire time. There was no anger from the failure of his plan at all in the laughter. Instead, it was filled with surprise and joy. There was even a hint of naivety, like a child who had obtained a toy he liked. Among the 12 towering demon gods, the demon god Cheongqi that had never been injured the entire time began to laugh. His demon qi rapidly condensed, and his body gradually consolidated, gaining life. A pair of bright moons lit up in the surging demon qi. To no surprise, they were his eyes. He was shaped like a black tiger with wings on his back. An extremely distinct smile appeared on his face, and his huge mouth stretched into a terrifying arc. It was filled with sharp teeth. The laughter originated from his mouth. Boom! Cheongqi leisurely took a step forward, leaving the shackles of the demon's den. Countless interweaving cracks appeared in the void, like black chains, but they couldn't stop Cheongqi's footsteps. An invisible presence expanded out. Even the King of Southern Yu and the others who had retreated far away felt their breaths freeze. They were immediately tempted to flee on the Silver Dragon King. Cheongqi has really descended. The banyan tree king furrowed his brows. He could not guess how much Du Cheongqi would have to pay for this action, but it was definitely much more difficult than the descent of his will. Even if it was just a doppelganger condensed from demonic energy, Controlling it as the mastermind behind the scenes was completely different from jumping onto the stage and directly interfering. Even his king had not expected Cheong-chi to do this. Rumble. A string of thunderclaps resounded through the heavens and the earth, and in the blink of an eye, the sky had become a pool of lightning. The astral winds that were originally only circling high in the sky roared and tore the demonic clouds apart. The earth cracked and magma gushed out. There was also a formless magnetic force rising up from the ground to connect with the astral winds. The world seemed to be infuriated, releasing a terrifying warning. The swamp had already become a scene of the apocalypse. Cheong-chi ignored the wrath of the world and continued to walk with composure, walking over from the scene of the apocalypse towards Li Qingshan and Little and as if it was mocking the uselessness of the world. Little and swung her sword and blocked in front of Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan grabbed her hand and stood beside her, staring at the approaching Cheong-chi. He had never minded accepting her protection, but the enemy they faced this time was unprecedented and beyond his imagination. Looks like it's really over this time, the king of Southern Yu sighed. Even if the power that Cheong-chi could unleash in this world was limited, the tremendous difference in cultivation had already determined that Li Qingshan and the others had no chance of victory at all, not to mention that Cheong-chi's current strength had already approached the limits that this world could contain. It was equivalent to the peak of the third heavenly tribulation. Probably no one in the 9 provinces was his opponent. Yi Wei-yang originally wanted to express her agreement, but then she looked at the Banyan Tree King. Yes. The Banyan Tree King closed his eyes. Descending regardless of the price had already demonstrated his determination to succeed. No matter what gods wanted to do, mortals would struggle to oppose them. Yi Wei-yang looked away in some disappointment. Yeah, why did miracles keep happening? Boom. Cheong-chi's huge claw stopped before them and was immediately swallowed by the magma. He did not care at all, lowering his head and looking at Li Qingshan. What a fascinating performance. A terrifying aura swallowed up Li Qingshan, but he was unfazed, as he had seen even more majestic figures in the past. He smiled resplendently. Then are there any prizes? Everything you want in the demon domain. You will become the ruler of Qingqi Mountain, second only to me. Countless demon domains and trillions of demon folk will listen to your commands, allowing you to do whatever you want. By then, you'll find this world to be far too small. Cheong-chi's offer left everyone tongue-tied. Originally, the king of Southern Yu had even been thinking that if Li Qingshan joined the demon domain, he might become the ruler of this world. Only now did he discover that he was still far too indecisive. Even his most exaggerated imagination seemed insignificant. Let's hope we're not one of the countless demon domains. The king of Southern Yu sighed. Oh my, a mighty figure. If I had known earlier, I would have curried favor with him. Elder Shu sure has a good eye. Yi Wei-yang joked, but her eyes were filled with undisguisable envy. Just who could resist something like that? The Banyan Tree King smiled wryly. He really had no idea whether he should be happy or sad. Hehe, it's a pity that you can't give me what I want. What is it? Don't waste time like a coward. Every second I stay here comes at a tremendous price. Cheong-chi's head drooped down a little more. The lightning and atmospheric winds in the surroundings had already begun bombarding his body, but they were blocked by a faint ring of Demon King. The laws of the world were like invisible shackles. The stronger one was and the higher one's cultivation was, the stronger the repulsion would be. No matter how powerful Cheong-chi was, it was impossible for him to contend against the entire world. However, his undisguised calmness was even more terrifying than a cold threat. Your life. Li Qingshan's smile vanished and he said resolutely. In that moment, time and space seemed to freeze. Although he also wanted to say where there's life, there's hope, he could still clearly remember someone saying to him, remember, don't lower your head to anyone, because you've once ridden on my back. Chapter 972. Within the roaring wind and rumbling thunder, Li Qingshan's resolute voice rang out clearly. In the Silver Dragon King, the king of Southern Yu and the others were all stunned. How could there be such a foolish person in the world? He would rather be crushed than lower his head. Even though they were all kings that looked down on the world, None of them felt that lowering their heads to a true god was something shameful, let alone the fact that Cheongchi had already demonstrated sufficient sincerity. It was definitely an honor to receive such attention from a god. Only the banyan tree king had a vague guess, but he only let out a long sigh inside. Cheongchi was taken aback as well. Although he told Li Qingshan to stop trying to stall for time, he never expected him to be so decisive, actually leaving no room for negotiation. He lowered his head and bared his teeth. How foolish. And how strange. Li Qingshan, do you really think I won't kill you? Then come. Li Qingshan spread his arms, ready to die. You're very interesting as well, but I won't let you stab me with that sword. Cheongchi's gaze suddenly shifted and landed on Little Anne. The sword in Little Anne's hand trembled involuntarily. Originally, he wanted to use the opportunity created by Li Qingshan to assassinate Cheongchi. He was already prepared to draw his sword. With the power of the Buddha slaying sword, he should be able to heavily injure Cheongchi's clone. However, he clearly did not move at all, nor did he give off any killing intent, yet Cheongchi saw through him with a single glance. This enemy was no longer as simple as a powerful enemy. He was basically flawless. Li Qingshan's heart sank. Cheongchi really was not giving him any chances at all. Was he really going to die here today? You recognize this sword? Little Anne held up the Buddha slaying sword and asked in thought. Not only do I recognize this sword, but I also recognize your flames. Not only is the path you wish to take intolerable to immortals and Buddhas, but even the demon domain is intolerable to you. Go, and I'll spare your life. Cheongchi's voice boomed out, drowning out the rumbling thunder and howling of the wind as it bore down. Little Anne's body swayed. His clothes and long hair danced in the wind, but his expression did not change. He only gripped the Buddha slaying sword tightly. Li Qingshan's eyes were solemn as he gathered the power of vibration and prepared to fight to the death. Even if there was no chance of victory, even if it meant certain death, he still had to fight. Li Qingshan, it's truly too boring to crush you like this. Do you want to live or die? Cheongchi changed the topic, and the interest in its eyes grew even stronger. Of course. Li Qingshan shouted. Then let's make a bet. What bet? Today, I have bullied you. You must be feeling indignant. I will give you some time. He paused. 500 years. Come to Qingqi Mountain and we will fight again. If you lose, fine. If I can't topple your Qingqi Mountain in 500 years, I'll listen to your orders. Li Qingshan's eyes lit up. He did not expect such a good thing to happen. 500 years was a huge amount of time. He would definitely be able to transcend the tribulation and ascend to outer space. Even if he was still not Cheongchi's opponent, as long as he did not go to the demon area, Cheongchi would not be able to do anything to him. This is what you said. Let's clap hands and swear. If I lose, it will be the same. Cheongchi laughed strangely. Its body shrank rapidly and turned into a human. Its body twisted like a figure in an abstract painting. It was shrouded in a layer of demonic light, and its face could not be seen clearly. It reached out its distorted right hand to Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan felt as if he had been tricked, but he could not go back on his word. He stepped forward and clapped hands with Cheongchi to swear. Pa. The moment the two palms clapped, the surrounding strong wind and thunder calmed down. There seemed to be some invisible power that isolated the anger of heaven and earth. Li Qingshan vaguely saw a long, quiet river meandering in the void. It was vast and boundless, as if it had transcended time and space. It was difficult to calculate its length with ordinary measurements. Ha 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 ha. Cheongchi's arrogant laughter was gradually drowned in the thunder. It was full of complacency, and its body was distorted by the invisible laws of heaven and earth. With a boom, it suddenly collapsed into a monstrous demonic aura. It surged and spread for thousands of miles, drowning the whole swamp and even the silver dragon king in the sky. In an instant, the thunder and wind stopped, as if the anger of heaven and earth had calmed down. The 12 citadel demon formation of the ominous collapsed as well, and Li Qingshan felt his entire body lighten up. He glanced at his palm, and the river appeared in his head again. He had a vague feeling that the oath was probably not as simple as it seemed. He felt like he had to pay a visit to Qingqi Mountain. Was this another trap? At the same time, somewhere in the demon domain, the 12 pillars stood tall. It was as if the scene created by the 12 citadel demon formation of the evil had become reality. The 12 supreme demon gods of the demon domain were sitting on the pillars, discussing something. There were vaguely words like desireless heavenly palace, Zhenwu, devil rinsing heavenly venerable, 7 mansions of the north, ha 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 ha. Qi's laughter was so loud that it attracted the attention of the demon gods. They asked, Qi, what are you laughing at? Originally, Qi had been in a daze, and the other demon gods were not surprised. They knew that he hated such solemn and lengthy meetings the most, but they did not dare to underestimate him. This was because his mind was quick-witted, and he was always unpredictable. Often, he had a surprising way of winning. Then, they saw the smile on his lips, and there were a few snake-like thunderbolts intertwining on his body. They knew that his consciousness had arrived in some world and found something interesting, and he was being rejected by the laws of heaven and earth. The other demon gods disdained such a waste of effort, but they would not say anything. It was only when Qi laughed and there was a winding river above his head that they asked in shock, "You made a blood oath of the Styx river." Legend had it that the Styx river was the first river at the beginning of the world. Its flow defined time and formed destiny. An oath to the Styx river had a strong binding force. Once a blood oath was made, even the gods could not go back on their word, and even their destiny would be distorted. Qi smiled without saying a word, and he was filled with undisguised smugness. The demon gods did not ask any more questions and continued their discussion. 500 years was a very short time for him. The reason why it was not 50 years or 5 years, but 500 years was that the Styx river blood oath needed the approval of both parties from the bottom of their hearts. If the time was too short, Li Qingshan might agree, but the result would be mutual destruction, and it would be meaningless. 500 years was enough for the Styx river blood oath to be deeply rooted in destiny, and only then would he be obedient. There were many hidden and complicated conditions for the Styx river blood oath, and one of them was fairness. It was like a scale, and both parties had to put in enough chips. Although there could be some imbalance, once there was a complete imbalance, it would not be possible. Therefore, it needed 500 years to balance it. Qi even added, if I lose, it will be the same. Other than that, there were some hidden harsh conditions. For example, in these 500 years, not only could he not initiate an attack, he could not intentionally suppress Li Qingshan. These were all his chips. That was why the demon gods were so shocked. The Styx river was not a tool that could be used casually, and there were many risks involved. If they were not careful, they could be affected. Usually, only existences at their level needed to make a Styx river blood oath to restrain each other. For weaker existences, there were many kinds of oaths that could guarantee that they would not lose anything. The blood oath book in Li Qingshan's hands was originally a method from the demon territory, and it could be considered a poor imitation of the Styx river blood oath. Qi had his own considerations in choosing to make a Styx river blood oath book. A large part of it was because of Little Anne's appearance. It could not be helped. The white bone bodhisattva, who had once tried to refine the hungry ghost realm, was too famous. Although she did not succeed in the end, her act of challenging the order of the 6 paths of reincarnation was enough to make people respect her. The Samadhi white bone fire was even more famous in the 6 paths of reincarnation. When Little Anne first appeared, Qi had some doubts. This was because an inheritance of this level could not be obtained with luck, and it was almost impossible for it to appear in a world of this level. However, when Xiaoan slew the kings of Yin and Yang in a single stroke and refined them into the Samdi flames of white bone, Qi was already certain. He could play around with the 9 provinces, but he would have to think twice before facing a white bone successor. Moreover, he had never been able to see through Li Qingshan's inheritance. This white bone descendant clearly had a relationship with Li Qingshan, which was even more thought-provoking. If Li Qingshan and Little Anne were both immortals and Buddhas, Qi would not mind immediately eliminating them. After all, they were enemies. However, they were obviously not. Li Qingshan had transformed into a demon, and there was some meaning of the coexistence of gods and demons. On the other hand, the white-bone bodhisattva wanted to burn all living things, and everywhere she went, the world would become a land of death. Not even a single flower or grass could survive. Even the demon territory could not accommodate her, and she could not be more evil. If he killed the descendants of 2 demonic path giants just for a game, then it was not because he was too curious, but because there was something wrong with his brain. As the saying goes, curiosity killed the cat. To be able to live until now and become an evil god, he first had to distinguish the difference between playing and courting death. Therefore, although he put on a great posture and did not hesitate to send his incarnation to the 9 provinces, it was all a bluff. He did not want to kill Li Qingshan at all, but just to force him to make this bet. Choosing the fairer blood oath of the Styx river was also to have some leeway in the future. If no one came to interfere, it would be the best, as he would have a powerful helper. If the white-bone bodhisattva or some other more terrifying existence jumped out, his action was not too much of a bully. At worst, he would just let them go. He was not worried that he would lose the bet. In a mere 500 years, any great cultivator in the 9 provinces would have a cultivation base of 1,000 or 800 years, and the monster kings would have thousands of years. No matter how strong Li Qingshan's inheritance was, it was almost impossible for him to cross so many realms in such a short time. 500 years later, he might not even be able to walk into Mount Qingqi, let alone defeat him and push down Mount Qingqi. Moreover, there was a huge trap hidden in the Styx river blood oath. If he could really walk into this world, he would realize that 500 years was not as long as he thought. "Qingshan, are you okay?" Little and asked with concern. Chapter 973. Little and gently pulled Li Qingshan into her arms. Suddenly, she looked back, and a streak of silver light appeared. The Silver Dragon King tore through the surging demon chi and cast down a silver pillar of light nearby. "Fellow Little Anne, please board the ship for a chat. The King of Southern you invited." Little Anne considered it for a moment before picking up Li Qingshan and stepping into the silver pillar of light. She rose up slowly and boarded the Silver Dragon King. A puppet king led the way, taking her to the bridge. The Banyan Tree King, the King of Southern Yi Duanhai, and Yi Weiyang all stood up to receive them, bowing to express their respect. In the cultivation community, cultivation and strength were the foundation of everything. As Li Qingshan and Little and underwent the 3rd heavenly tribulation together, displaying terrifying strength and limitless potential, their statuses in their eyes had become completely different. The Banyan Tree King asked, "Qingshan is fine, right? Thank you for your concern, Senior. He's just asleep." Little Anne bowed before saying to everyone, "Thank you for saving my life, but please don't leak what happened today." Whether it was her Samdi flames of white bone or Chungchi's descent, once news of it spread, it would lead to unpredictable trouble. If it was just some orthodox Buddhist cultivators who had come to purge demons, then it would be fine, but if they attracted the attention of certain existences from beyond the heavens, then the small trouble would become trouble. Of course, they all said. After witnessing the battle today, who would be willing to offend them? The King of Southern Yu gazed at the woman with supreme beauty and felt very emotional inside. He felt rather regretful. He should have forged a good relationship with her in the past. Little Anne went without saying, but Li Qingshan was someone who clearly distinguished between kindness and grievances. He was extremely worth befriending. If he could obtain the assistance of the 2 of them, it would be even better than 10 honored guests. The King of Chu's estate of the Green Province would be a piece of cake. But who would have thought that in a mere 10 or 20 years, they would ascend to the peak of the 9 states and stand side by side with the kings? They could even look down upon the masses. Back then, Li Qingshan's title of King of Savages made people feel that it did not live up to its name. Now, King of the Southern Territory was nothing to him. How could the entire 9 states compare to the vast demonic region that he had given up? He had made an agreement of 500 years with a deity while talking and laughing. Even if he really lost 500 years later, he would still be one of the few great figures in the demonic region. With one command, he could decide the fate of such a world. Compared to that, The feud between the Mist Province and the Green Province was a little like a snail's horn. It was not worth mentioning. As a result, he admired the Banyan Tree King's wisdom and insight even more. Originally, he still did not understand why the Banyan Tree King would treat a junior with special attention, even referring to him as a fellow. As it seemed now, it basically brought him endless benefits. Li Qingshan was still asleep. Little and had changed his method of cultivation slightly, no longer being completely emotionless to the people around him, but he was still calm and indifferent. He did not have much to say to the people around him. The reason why he ascended the Silver Dragon King was just to deal with the situation. He did not want to provoke unnecessary trouble because of his attitude. The King of Southern Yu and the others had yet to calm down either. They were not in the mood to talk too much, not because their mental fortitude and cultivation were lacking, but because they were shocked by the world beyond the well as frogs at the bottom of a well. They gained a new understanding of their own path of cultivation. "Where are you going?" "I'll give you a ride." "Thank you." "Fire Melt Mountain." Little and said quietly, but some thoughts surfaced in her mind, "This is the greatest enemy of the King Chu Lai's estate. If I swing my sword, will I be able to kill him?" In the past, she would never have thought of something like that. As a matter of fact, there was no difference between the King of Southern Yu and the Chu Lai King to her, but now, a fundamental change had occurred. Her past memories and experiences were no longer completely meaningless, but she had no idea whether this was good or bad. Had she followed the path that the Whitebone Bodhisattva had once taken, or had she embarked on the wrong path with the path of Whitebone and great beauty? All of this required time to prove. Of course, it was just a thought. She would never risk Li Qingshan's safety, nor did she believe there was a need for her to take part in this grievance. At this moment, the Azura field in Li Qingshan's arms trembled. As it turned out, Gong Yuan had grown impatient. Little and opened the Azura field and let out Gong Yuan. Gong Yuan had already tidied up her appearance, recovering her cold and arrogant demeanor. She glanced at Li Qingshan deeply with her deep blue eyes before looking away. Then she greeted the King of Southern Yu and the others one by one. Although she remained in the Azura field, she had Yin Qing keep an eye on the situation outside the entire time. She had an idea about everything that was happening right now. As a matter of fact, she had even learnt about something that the King of Southern Yu and the others did not know about, such as how a certain will in the Azura realm had once invited Li Qingshan to join them. Yi Wei Yang looked at Gong Yuan meaningfully and smiled. "You sure have a good eye, sister. You've caught yourself a good husband." Gong Yuan shot a cold glance at Yi Wei Yang and said to little Anne, "If he wakes up, tell him to pay a visit to the South Sea." Afterwards, she left the Silver Dragon King. She did not even take back the heart of the abyss. The Silver Dragon King stopped above Fire Melt Mountain. Little and bade farewell with Li Qingshan in his arms. The King of Southern Yu said, "If fellow Qingshan wakes up, please invite him to the Mist Capital for a drink." Afterwards, the Shadow Queen also sent an invitation. Yi Duanhai also spoke up, but the person he invited was not Li Qingshan, but little and fellow, "I've never heard of your path of the sword before. If there's the opportunity, I'd like to ask for your guidance. I'll pass on the message, but please forgive me, Pavilion Master Yi. I'm not a sword cultivator, so there's nothing I can teach you." Yi Duanhai said nothing more. The path of the sword was like a cultivation method. It had always been a secret that could not be passed on to others. He had only said that because he was delighted by the prospect. Since it did not work out, then so be it. It was not like he was displeased. Not to mention that he did not even have the slightest confidence of victory when he stood before her right now. So what if he was displeased? Little and nodded and bade farewell. He landed on the divine Wutong tree on the main peak of Fire Melt Mountain with Li Qingshan in his arms before entering the phoenix's nest. A tiny figure rushed over and hugged Li Qingshan firmly, sobbing. "First Father, you've finally returned. Take me away. I can't stay here any longer. Second Father's not human. First Father, answer me. What's wrong with you, First Father? Don't die. What am I supposed to do if you die?" Li Fengyuan. Feng Shiwu let out a furious roar, grabbing the little phoenix by the neck and lifting him up. Most of his gentlemanly demeanor had already been worn away. Only after this period of arduous education did he discover just how cute the phoenix's embryo was. Back then, when Li Qingshan was around, he would directly kick the little phoenix if he said anything wrong. The child's life force was startlingly great anyway. Regular, small injuries were nothing. Feng Shiwu even found this method of discipline to be too violent, so he often stopped Li Qingshan. Now, he was close to the point where he could no longer hold himself back. It was said that naughty children were difficult to discipline. A phoenix child with great strength and intelligence was basically a father's nightmare. Little did he know that the little phoenix would rather suffer a few kicks from Li Qingshan than listen to Feng Shiwu's long-winded lecture. What he saw this time really touched his heart. Chapter 974. So noisy. Li Qingshan grumbled and threw both fists. Ouch. Before Li Fengyuan could even respond, he was sent flying, slamming into the wall. He trembled all over. Feng Shiwu's expression changed, and he swung his sleeve to block. An unstoppable force appeared, hiding a profound power of tremors. He staggered back over a dozen steps. Just now, he came to a halt. When he looked at Li Qingshan again, his eyes had not even opened, as if he was still asleep. He was surprised and doubtful. Was he really asleep, or was he pretending to be asleep? If he possessed such power when he attacked instinctively while asleep, that would be far too terrifying. In the past, he had treated Li Qingshan in a different light, not treating him like a regular demon commander. However, he felt like while Li Qingshan had a promising future, it would take him a century or two at the very least before he could stand on equal footing with him. He never thought he would actually undergo the tribulation and become a demon king in just a few months, and he would be shocked the moment he struck out. Stop disturbing him. Let him rest properly. Little and made Li Qingshan lie down and use his head as a pillow. With a flash of fire, Li Fengyuan wiped away the blood from the corner of his lips and lunged over again. With the purest phoenix bloodline, even half of demon kings paled in comparison to his vitality and recovery. He called out, "First father, you're so powerful. Even second father isn't your opponent. No one can stop you anymore." His voice came to a halt. A slender hand wrapped around his neck, suspending him in the air before slowly tightening. Under the gaze of those clear eyes, the little phoenix seemed like he had seen a ghost. He struggled desperately. "You underwent the tribulation too? Release him." Feng Shiwu was alarmed. The little phoenix was only a demon commander, but he possessed extremely great strength. Under his guidance during this period of time, his strength was already on par with demon kings. In particular, when it came to speed, he had actually been suppressed in a single move, unable to fight back. And, little and had struck without any prior signs, actually giving him a feeling of unpredictability. Even he found her expression chilling right now. "Sure." Little and raised her index finger to her lips. Li Fengyuan nodded furiously, and only then did she release him. Li Fengyuan immediately fled far away, hiding behind Feng Shiwu. In that instant, Feng Shiwu felt like this method of education was not entirely bad. However, he immediately tossed this thought aside and asked, "What exactly is going on?" "Let's wait until he wakes up." "All right then, I'll play the zither for him." With a wave of Feng Shiwu's hand, the zither and zither were all prepared. The incense burner breathed out slowly as he sat on his knees and stroked the zither. The zither played softly. Hearing the sound of the zither, Li Qingshan's expression became increasingly calm. The entire divine Wutong tree seemed to have turned into a zither. Its branches and leaves swayed, and the zither music echoed. Little and nodded towards Feng Shiwu in gratitude. The phoenix's nest really was the best place to rest. It allowed Qingshan to sleep well and recover as soon as possible. Li Qingshan woke up. After sleeping for over half a month, he had a long dream. The dream was a mess of changes. There were the wasted experiences of his past life, as well as the struggles of his current life. Enemies, friends, and lovers leapt out one by one before vanishing again. In the end, there were demon kings circling around him, twisting and merging into a strangely laughing head. It repeated, 500 years, 500 years, 500 years. In the background was the winding river in space. The head grew larger and larger, as if it wanted to swallow him in a single gulp. He furrowed his brows and gritted his teeth as if he was trapped in a nightmare. He felt even more distressed and anxious than when he was being hunted down by the Dragon King of the Sea. There was a rumble. The scene shattered. A burly figure said without even looking back, "No, 10,000 years. Yes, 10,000 years." Li Qingshan smiled and murmured to himself. The figure gradually traveled off into the distance, sinking into the darkness. He woke up from his dream and heard someone whisper, "Second father, what's first father talking about? 10,000 years. That's my blood, sweat, and tears for you. You have to be obedient in the future, do you understand?" Feng Shiwu never forgot to educate him. "Okay." Li Fengyuan nodded obediently. His eyes rolled around as he gazed at Li Qingshan eagerly. Li Qingshan yawned and yawned. He sat up and leaned against his hand. His head still hurt slightly, and he was still exhausted. He had yet to recover completely. He had fought for several months, sweeping through the demon caverns, then falling into the 12-citadel demon formation of the ominous, entering the demon cavern again, undergoing the third heavenly tribulation, fending off the 7 demon kings, being hunted down by the demon emperor, and facing a demon god in the end. There were so many things. Regular great cultivators would feel extremely exhausted if they went through even one of them, yet he had gone through them all in a single breath. Although he would never lack battle intent in battle, it was unavoidable for him to feel extremely exhausted after the battle. "First father, you're awake." Li Fengyuan glanced at Little and carefully and greeted him gently and obediently. "Damned brat, it's been a few months since we last met, so why aren't you enthusiastic? Don't learn from your second father." Li Qingshan reached out and pulled Li Fengyuan into his arms. "I was just a little enthusiastic, and you sent me flying." "Stop. I'm about to break." Li Fengyuan felt all the bones in his body creak between Li Qingshan's arms. "Did I? Why don't I remember?" Li Qingshan scratched his head and laughed aloud. "Though, it's perfectly reasonable for a father to hit his son. It also contains my heavy fatherly love." Li Fengyuan's face twisted as if he was about to vomit. "What? You still don't accept this?" Li Qingshan shot a glance at him and exerted a little more force. Li Fengyuan immediately said, I do. First father is wise and mighty. You have your reasons for hitting me. How can I not accept this?" Feng Shiwu let out a long sigh. There was actually such a spineless phoenix in the world, and he was clearly beaten up, yet he seemed to enjoy it. He really had no idea what to say. "I didn't think you'd undergo the third heavenly tribulation so quickly. I've still underestimated you. Second brother." Li Qingshan sniggered. Li Fengyuan immediately understood and giggled. "Shut up." After a series of pleasantries, Li Qingshan told him everything that had happened. He did not hide too much from Feng Shiwu and the little phoenix. He only hid the parts that were directly related to his secrets, such as Little An's path of white bone and great beauty. The little phoenix leaned against his shoulder and beamed with joy as he listened. He was tempted to take part in it and fight with Li Qingshan. "Qiongqi." Feng Shiwu was greatly surprised. Only at his realm of cultivation could he deeply understand just what a true god meant. Li Qingshan's purging of the demons was actually a trap laid down by evil god Qiongqi. In the end, he even directly descended with an incarnation and invited Li Qingshan to the demon domain. If it were not for the fact that he knew Li Qingshan was not the type of person who spoke nonsense, Feng Shiwu basically wondered whether he was still dreaming, or whether he was making up a fairy tale to fool a child. This was just far too unimaginable. Yeah, it's that bastard. He really has nothing better to do. How can there be such a bored god? Fortunately, he's bored enough. Originally, I thought I was dead for sure, but I never thought he'd only set a time limit of 500 years. Li Qingshan said rather happily. The situation back then was indeed hopeless. Even if he was in perfect condition, there was no chance of victory even if he worked with Little Anne. Chapter 975. I know. 500 years is far too short, But it's not like there's no chance. Li Qingshan was not surprised at all. If it were a regular cultivator, they could have declared the bet a loss before it had even begun. They had no chance at all, but he was confident that he was not regular. The question is, how exactly do you calculate these 500 years? Feng Shiwu shook his head with his hands behind his back. What do you mean calculate? Li Qingshan was confused. Were there any other ways to calculate time? No matter how he calculated it, it was still that long. You really don't know. Your 500 years is different from Chengqi's 500 years. What's the difference? Li Qingshan felt rather uneasy. Haven't you heard of the saying, a day in heaven is a year on earth? Li Qingshan immediately realized what he meant. His expression changed. You mean, the 3,000 worlds come in all shapes and sizes, high and low. The larger and higher they are, the faster time flows. As a god, Chengqi definitely resides in an extremely high and distant world. To us, it's equivalent to heaven. Chengqi's 500 years might be 5,000 years or even more to the 9 provinces. That's not too bad. However, if you calculate it according to your 500 years, which is the 9 provinces' 500 years, you might only have 50 years left after ascending, or even less. Fuck. Li Qingshan cursed. So something like that really happened? Is the difference really that great? I've never been to a higher and distant world either. I only have a rough idea. I'm not sure about the exact details. Perhaps I've still underestimated it. After all, summer insects cannot speak of ice, and a young year cannot tell the old year. There's another saying, 7 days in a cave is 1,000 years in the world. It sounds very unbelievable, but places like that do exist. Stop. Don't go on. Li Qingshan raised his hand. What a guy. If he really calculated it according to 7 days in a cave is 1,000 years in the world, then he only had 3.5 days left of his 500 years. In other words, while Chengqi blanked out, he would have to fight him in front of Chengqi. It was no wonder that Chengqi had the patience to wait 500 years for him. The idea of using 500 years to challenge a god was already bordering on madness. 50 years was simply a fantasy, so what if it was 3 days? Daydreaming? You don't have to worry too much. If you didn't mention this when you swore the oath, you basically left some leeway, said Feng Shiwu. I hope so. Li Qingshan frowned and thought of the winding river in the void. Although he did not know that it was the legendary Styx river, he vaguely understood that it had something to do with Chengqi's bet. He would not overestimate the morality of an evil god. Instead, he felt that it was only natural. The kind of plot where Chengqi would leave his opponent alone and give them enough time to grow before finally having a fair duel would only appear in anime. No matter how he looked at it, Chengqi didn't seem to be stupid at all. However, he wasn't particularly angry. After all, he had preserved his useful body. Whether it was 500 years or 50 years, he finally had a buffer period. He could slowly think of a solution. If he wasn't strong enough, he could think of a way to cancel the vow. What truly worried him was the difference in the flow of time. Brother Ox gave him 10,000 years to ascend to the 9 heavens. He originally felt that it was an extremely long time and even unreachable. But looking at it now, the 9 heavens definitely existed even higher than the demon domain. Then just how long was 10,000 years equivalent to Brother Ox? With each step he took, the 10,000 years would rapidly shrink, and there was nothing he could do about it. He had to race against time and increase his cultivation as quickly as possible. Only then could he make it to the 9 heavens. This was a vow that he would rather die than cancel. Feng Shiwu still thought that Li Qingshan was worried about Chengqi, but little and could tell what he was really thinking. He tugged at his sleeve. We'll definitely make it. Of course. Li Qingshan smiled resplendently. Worrying was not his personality. Even if he frowned every single day, he could not make the 9 heavens even a tiny bit closer. Why didn't he just open his mind and stride forward? It's time to return to the Green Province. Li Qingshan gazed into the distant north. There were some grievances waiting for him to settle. There were some old friends that he had been separated from for a very long time already. Suddenly, he thought of a beautiful figure. After so many years, was she still waiting for him? Perhaps she had already given up on him. This separation had already lasted for far, far too long. Little and agreed with him. She also seemed to be in thought. After changing her path of cultivation, memories of the past would frequently surge into her head. Her past parents were no longer unimportant symbols either. However, she still had not thought about how she should face them, or whether she should continue maintaining the current situation. This was a problem that the emotionless and sexless her had never experienced. Li Qingshan rubbed her head. He had sensed her changes a long time ago, so he felt happy for her. First father, can you take me with you to the Green Province? The little phoenix flew over. His eyes were filled with eagerness. You're not allowed to go anywhere. Feng Shiwu grabbed him by the neck. First father, I promise I won't cause you any trouble. I'll properly train and increase my cultivation. I'll help you fight the Dragon King and Cheongqi in the future. The little phoenix patted his chest and guaranteed. Damned brat, there's nothing fun in the Green Province. Li Qingshan shook his head with a smile. He was rather fond of this adopted son he had personally hatched. He was not just joking when he said he would help him fight the Dragon King. The divine bird phoenix had the confidence to do that. All it lacked was time. Sigh, time again. Just how was he supposed to deal with this? Anywhere is better than being imprisoned here. I beg you, first father, please take pity on me. The little phoenix gazed at Li Qingshan tearfully, completely ignoring the furious Feng Shiwu. Li Feng Yuan. Feng Shiwu bellowed furiously and slammed the little phoenix against the ground viciously. He struggled, refusing to yield. He constantly called out, "Save me, first father. Just take him with you." Little and said. Li Qingshan was slightly surprised. Even he, who loved the little phoenix, did not want to take a burden that would definitely cause trouble with him. Little An's attitude towards the little phoenix had always been cold, so why had it suddenly changed today? Even the little phoenix forgot to struggle. He stared at her blankly. A bird should soar in the sky, not to mention a divine bird phoenix. Fellow Daoist Feng, restraining him here might be helpful for his cultivation, but it will only wear down his spirit. What he lacks now is not power. Little An spoke with fervor and assurance for once, which made Feng Shiwu sink into his thoughts. During this period of time, the little phoenix did indeed seem more and more restless and uneasy. I know you're afraid of attracting attention, but with Qingshan and my protection, who can harm him? Let alone the fact that he himself possesses the strength of a demon king. If he doesn't even have the courage to venture out under these circumstances, can he still be regarded as a phoenix? He's not even as good as a pheasant. I'll never be a pheasant. The little phoenix called out in an extremely cooperative manner. Chapter 976. All right then. After some consideration, Feng Shiwu finally nodded and agreed. He really could not trap the little phoenix in this tiny phoenix nest forever, and staying by Li Qingshan's side was even safer than staying on Fire Melt Mountain. The little phoenix let out a cheer and turned back to his original form, flying around Feng Shiwu a few times before throwing himself into his arms. Thank you, second father. There will be a day when you leave this world and follow your true parents. You will find that Wutong that belongs to you. Feng Shiwu hugged him tightly. His smile carried some melancholy. The phoenix flew away, leaving behind the Wutong in the air for 10,000 years. The little phoenix was taken aback. Suddenly, he felt pained. How could he not sense the 10,000 years of companionship? Originally, he wanted to fly even further away, but only when he truly parted did he discover he still had not grown accustomed to it. This was a feeling that the phoenix's legacy had never taught him. Tears rolled down his cheeks. He almost wanted to change his words. It's not easy to find a Wutong as good as you. If you don't want to be separated like this, then cultivate properly. Let's go to a higher world together and take a look. Li Qingshan patted Feng Shiwu's shoulder. That's reasonable. We should take another step forward. Feng Shiwu smiled as well. He was a plant demon, but as a natural divine tree, his cultivation speed should not have been so slow. He had spent far too much effort hatching the phoenix's embryo, which affected his cultivation speed. Don't worry, second father. I definitely won't find another Wutong. The little phoenix wiped away his tears and clenched his fists. Feng Shiwu smiled and said to Li Qingshan, I'll leave Feng Yuan to you. You're the first father. If anything happens to him, I cut the bullshit. He needs to grasp his own fate. If he's bold enough to do it, then he's bold enough to take responsibility for it. If it's not because his surname is Li, I'll take care of him for the rest of his life. Even if he dies outside, he can forget about it, Li Qingshan said firmly. He wanted something spectacular, yet he was afraid of danger. How could there be something as good as that in the world? Feng Shiwu was speechless. His expression changed several times before finally shaking his head and sighing. This is the first time I feel that you're indeed more suitable to be a father than me. Of course. The little phoenix clenched his fists. His gaze was determined. No matter how different the phoenix's legacy was from Li Qingshan's will, there was one similarity at the very least, and that was to not be a coward. All right, let's go. Li Qingshan leapt out of the crater and Little and followed closely behind. The little phoenix hugged Li Qingshan again. Second father, I'll come back to visit you when I have time. A phoenix cry rang out in all directions. The cry of a young phoenix was clearer than the cry of an old phoenix. The phoenix spread its wings, rushing into the heavens, unexpectedly also tens of thousands of jong in brilliance. A few shamans and cultivators gathered at the foot of Fire Melt Mountain. They had all come to Fire Melt Mountain in search of treasure before being caught by the little phoenix. Right now, they all gazed at the sky in amazement. The radiance was brilliant, dazzling and dazzling. She turned her neck, and her feathers danced in the wind. She had an innate elegance, and even Li Qingshan and Little and were amazed. Little Phoenix flew a few rounds in the sky and stopped on Li Qingshan's shoulder, lightly pecking his cheek. Let's go. Let's go. Little and passed on what Gong Yuan and the others had told her to Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan gazed at the South Sea in the distance and took out the heart of the abyss. He said, Wait for me on Savage Mountain first. I'll pay a visit to the South Sea. Before he had even finished talking, he had already taken off, vanishing into the horizon in the blink of an eye. The little phoenix secretly glanced at little Anne. He felt some instinctive fear towards her. He could not help but feel rather uneasy about being alone with her right now. I'll let you fly for a while. Let's see who reaches Savage Mountain first. The loser has to pluck a feather for me. Little Anne smiled. The smile was different from before. Instead, it was filled with true emotions. The little phoenix immediately found her to be so amiable, which roused his competitive spirit again. He flapped his wings and said, All right. As a result, he embarked on the first journey of his life in a bet. He flapped his wings as hard as he could and flew towards the distant horizon. The world seemed endless. Feng Shiwu stood at the top of a tree and gazed into the distance. He wanted to say something, but he faltered a few times. The little phoenix was his greatest secret. Originally, he wanted to keep this secret under wraps and avoid being coveted by others. However, with such a grand flight, the little phoenix's existence would definitely be known by the world. However, on further thought, how could his true brilliance always remain hidden? Look, that's my child. On that day, many people saw a legendary phoenix fly across the sky. When Savage Mountain appeared on the horizon, the little phoenix glanced backwards. He still did not see Little Anne's figure, so he could not help but let out a complacent cry. He muttered to himself, You're trying to make me suffer, aren't you? But hold on, I have to pluck a feather if I lose. Why didn't I say what she has to do if she loses? You're thinking too much. A voice drifted over, as if it had rang out right by his ear. What? Before the little phoenix could even respond, he felt a slight pain. A white figure brushed past him. Little Anne held a feather between her fingers and vanished into the rolling mist that enveloped Savage Mountain. The little phoenix was extremely vexed, but he could not help but admire her strength. His endless fighting spirit was roused, and he became excited again. A feather was nothing to him. This was the first time he had flown like this in his life. He felt much faster than when he was on Fire Melt Mountain. He understood that this was because he had unleashed a portion of the power in his body. Looking back, Fire Melt Mountain had already vanished. He secretly made up his mind and dove towards Savage Mountain. The mist dispersed, and the view before him suddenly opened up. All he saw was Little and standing on a towering tree. He landed on it as well. The glorious light threw Savage Mountain into chaos. The Banyan Tree King was filled with amazement too. That's a phoenix. As if his past memories had been revived, the figure he originally thought he would never see again actually appeared before him again. He asked Little Anne, "Where did you find him?" "There's no need to say anything. I understand." Feng Shiwu had left the main peak of Fire Melt Mountain 10,000 years ago, so he had already guessed this. Combined with Li Qingshan's stay in the phoenix's nest, the matter became as clear as day. His Qingshan's foster son. Little Anne said. If he didn't have a foster father like that, why would Feng Shiwu let him out? The Banyan Tree King expressed his understanding. A droplet of phoenix blood refined into a pill could extend one's lifespan. It was enough to tempt any cultivator. First father is the strongest. You're the Banyan Tree King? I know you. Sure enough, you're much bigger than second father. That's right. I might not be a Wutong, but please rest for now, said the Banyan Tree King. He also felt rather honored. You're welcome, you're welcome. The little phoenix looked around curiously. What an auspicious omen, but what a pity. The Banyan Tree King sighed. Legend had it that the appearance of the phoenix was a symbol of peace, but the world was in chaos right now. Although Li Qingshan had basically flattened all the demon caverns in the south, the demon domain did not seem to have any intentions of giving up. The situation was becoming more and more chaotic. Chapter 977. Li Qingshan rushed into the atmospheric wind layer and wove the atmospheric winds into his wings of wind, flying at an unprecedented speed. His exhaustion from the battle had yet to vanish, but he felt extremely light. The sharp atmospheric winds brushed past his ears, and the scenery on the ground was thrown far behind him. A while later, he arrived above the boundless South Sea. There was a shadow on the surface of the sea. A storm was currently sweeping through. It was not as great as the storm that battered Fire Melt Mountain, but it was still quite large, displaying the might of the world without any fear. With a thought, Li Qingshan suddenly plummeted, diving into the storm. Fierce winds, heavy rain, lightning, and rumbling thunder rushed over, but it was only a fleeting sight. In just a few seconds, he had passed through the center of the storm. Looking back, a crack suddenly appeared in the thick storm clouds, creating a valley of sunlight in the darkness. The storm paused for a moment before collapsing and dispersing. Li Qingshan smiled resplendently and flew into the depths of the South Sea without even looking back. He arrived above the Crystal Palace and discovered with a sweep of his soul sense that Gong Yuan was currently cultivating in the sea abyss. He concealed his presence and dove down silently, arriving at the bottom of the sea abyss and silently approaching her from behind. Her deep blue hair drifted with the waves, and her slender figure seemed like the soul of the ocean, giving off a strange charm. When they were still over 30 meters apart, Gong Yuan suddenly sensed something and turned around. Li Qingshan, what are you trying to do by sneaking around like that? I'm just giving you a surprise. Li Qingshan laid out his hands, but he was surprised inside. She had actually discovered him beforehand. They really did dual cultivate together before. I don't think there's anything to be happy about. Return the heart of the abyss to me. Don't come over. Gong Yuan's expression was icy cold. With a wave of her hand, she carved out an ice wall in front of Li Qingshan. The icicles were like thorns, filled with a sense of threat. Is anyone home? Li Qingshan knocked on the ice wall. Yuan, open up. Don't waste my time. Gong Yuan frowned. She did not fall for his tricks. All right then. Li Qingshan's movements paused. According to his usual temperament, he wouldn't care what you said. Let alone this ice wall, even a glacier wouldn't be able to stop him. However, his current mood was very different. Gong Yuan's position in his heart was also not ordinary, so he stood still and threw the heart of the abyss over the ice wall. Gong Yuan checked it carefully, as if she was afraid that Li Qingshan would cheat her with a fake one. Li Qingshan shook his head. It was said that a woman's heart was like a needle at the bottom of the sea, let alone a woman who cultivated at the bottom of the sea. Everything that had happened in the Devil's Den was still vivid in his mind, and that passionate kiss was engraved in his heart. How could he change his attitude so quickly? I'm here to say goodbye. I'm going back to Qingju. I know. Gong Yuan put away the heart of the abyss. She had no intention of asking him to stay. I don't know when we'll meet again after today. If you need my help, feel free to come find me. Li Qingshan smiled helplessly. He did not approach her. Only when he vanished into the deep, gloomy seawater did the iciness on Gong Yuan's face recede just now, replaced by gloominess. From the perspective of the Merfolk Queen, she should have done everything she could to befriend Li Qingshan instead of coldly distancing herself from him. The strength and potential that Li Qingshan had displayed during the battle in the 12 Citadel Demon formation of the Ominous had amazed even the king of Southern Yu. Even demon god Chongqi wished to receive his assistance. Just how powerful of an ally was he? However, perhaps because he had nullified her inner demons, she was unable to maintain her composure anymore, or perhaps because of the infatuated nature of Merfolk, but she finally let her emotions get the better of her. Of course, she knew he would not stay in the South Sea, but she still held onto a sliver of hope. Perhaps he would change his mind. In the end, she was blocked by an ice wall. Her pride prevented her from asking him to stay. All she could do was gaze into the distance in melancholy. The profound light illuminates all reflected her face, and Li Qingshan sighed inside. He still had a very, very long path ahead of him. It was impossible for him to stay in a certain place for too long. Since they would have to bid farewell sooner or later, perhaps this was not a bad thing. When Li Qingshan's presence completely vanished, Gong Yuan closed her eyes gently and thought back to everything that had happened since they met. She experienced a different feeling inside, as well as a hint of bitterness. What a resolute man he was. Afterwards, she used the all-water to Ruin's End and did her best to use the cold power of Ruin's End to calm her various emotions. Suddenly, a pair of powerful arms wrapped around her tightly from behind. A familiar voice rang out by her ear, surprise. Li Qingshan. Gong Yuan was furious. She radiated with a bone-chilling coldness, freezing the seawater into ice. With a wave of her slender, beautiful fishtail, the ice shattered and shot everywhere. Li Qingshan laughed aloud. The entire sea abyss shook because of it. Being filled with so many worries really was not in his character. He deeply despised such a pretentious situation where words could not be spoken. As a result, he was determined to return. While she was uneasy, his sneak attack really succeeded. With a flap of his wings, he tore through the surface of the sea and reached the horizon. What do you want to do? Stay in the South Sea? How could Gong Yuan resist his strength? Not to mention that her cultivation method was even suppressed by him. No matter how she struggled, she could not break free from his embrace. All she could do was give up. The scenery here is quite nice. It's much better than the bottom of the ocean. Li Qingshan pointed at the sky. The sun was shining brightly. If you're turning me down, then just say it. Gong Yuan sneered. Sorry. Li Qingshan's gaze was sincere. Whatever. If you really stay, I'll look down on you instead. How are you going to deal with Chongqi? Gong Yuan asked. Chongqi is easy to deal with, although he might have fallen for a trick. Li Qingshan explained Feng Shiwu's analysis with a smile. That's easy to deal with. Gong Yuan widened her eyes. If it's a bet I was forced to make, I just have to find a way to renege on it. However, there are some agreements that can't be reneged on. Li Qingshan gazed at the sky. His eyes were filled with unquenchable desire. What agreement? This was the first time Gong Yuan had seen him like this. 10,000 years. Someone's waiting for me there. He said he'll wait for me for 1,000 days. Li Qingshan pointed straight at the sky. A day in heaven is a year on earth. No, a decade. Gong Yuan said in surprise. That's right. He once said that 10,000 years for me is just 1,000 days to him. I used to think that was just a metaphor, expressing that 10,000 years was nothing to him, but only now have I realized that he doesn't seem like someone who likes to use metaphors. Li Qingshan sniggered. Gong Yuan was unable to imagine just how far away that was. Time actually flowed 3,600 times faster than the 9 provinces. Your cultivation method is the legacy, that's right. That can be considered my greatest secret, Li Qingshan said. Originally, he had treated his transmigration as his greatest secret, but as it seemed now, possessing innate wisdom was nothing special at all. It's meaningless to me. Gong Yuan seemed disdainful, but she was unable to hold back her joy. It's pointless. I really don't know how to make a beauty smile. Just give me a casual smile when I'm so helpless. Li Qingshan smiled. Having left and returned, he did not ask for anything else. Gong Yuan smiled faintly. I hope that one day, your wish will come true and you can make it to that date. I'm very grateful. Li Qingshan's eyes lit up. He lowered his head and said, let's have a goodbye kiss. Gong Yuan sneered and turned her head away. Hey, I really have to leave this time. I don't know when we'll meet again. Then hurry up and leave. Gong Yuan waved her hand impatiently. All right then. Li Qingshan helplessly let go of her and slowly retreated. Just as she turned her head around, he used all his strength to flap his wings, increasing his speed to the limit. He flew up and kissed her lightly on the lips. Li Qingshan. Gong Yuan scolded. Li Qingshan laughed heartily. He spun and flew up into the sky, disappearing in the blink of an eye. His voice echoed between the clouds and mountains. The mountains will not change, and the rivers will flow forever. Yuan, we'll meet again. What a terrible man. Gong Yuan stood between the clouds and mountains for a while, as if he was still hiding somewhere and would come out at any time to force a hug on her. The white clouds drifted leisurely. This time, he had really gone far away. She touched her lips and smiled. The sea was vast and boundless, and the sky was misty and boundless. She thought in her heart, do you think those words can scare me? I'm also a cultivator. If I go through the tribulation and ascend, your 10,000 years will at most be a few thousand years to me. Maybe it will only be a few hundred years. Why do I calculate this? I can't be that kind of woman who waits passionately. Li Qingshan continued to head north, leaving the South Sea far behind. He looked straight ahead. After so many trials and tribulations, it was finally time to return. He shouted at the top of his voice. Chapter 978. First Senior Brother, you've returned. As soon as Li Qingshan returned to Savage Mountain, Duoj came up to receive him. I've made you wait. You can go first. I'll be returning to the Green Province right now. Really? Why don't we travel together? I just happen to have many things I don't understand about the demon suppression statuary, so I'd like to ask First Senior Brother. Duoj was still afraid that Li Qingshan would change his mind and try to coax him back to the Green Province. What, you still don't trust me? Li Qingshan patted his shoulder with a smile. I do. Duoj only felt like his First Senior Brother had changed drastically again in just a few short months. The resplendent sunlight gilded him, casting a black shadow. In a daze, he seemed taller than the surrounding mountains, possessing an incomparably stalwart bearing. However, only when he returned to his senses did he discover that it was just an illusion. His expression and bearing even seemed calmer than before. Li Qingshan said, then piss off. I still have some matters to attend to in the Mist Province, so it might take a few days. However, the journey is long, so I might even be a step faster than you. I'll set off right now to report back to Master. Duoj immediately set off, directly making his way out of Savage Mountain. First Father. The little phoenix flew down from the treetop and landed on Li Qingshan's shoulder. His resplendent tail feathers almost touched the ground. How's this place compared to Fire Melt Mountain? It's much more fun. Then you might as well just stay here. No, I want to go to the Green Province. As he spoke, Li Qingshan arrived before the Banyan Tree King and smiled. Fellow, you still owe me something. I knew you wouldn't forget about it. Come to Towering City. The Banyan Tree King said, I've already been waiting for quite some time. Duoj left Savage Mountain, afraid to fly in the sky. After switching to the demon suppression statuary, he could no longer be regarded as a demon folk, but his power still originated from the demon heart in his body. Right now, demon folk were being slaughtered throughout the Mist province, so he could not afford to be careless. Turning his head, he saw 3 beams of light piercing through the sea of fog and reaching the horizon. They flew over his head and headed north. His heart was completely at ease. Li Qingshan headed all the way north, and it didn't take long for him to leave Southsea County. He couldn't help but feel a little emotional as he recalled everything that had happened in the past 20 years, but he quickly threw these thoughts to the back of his mind. There was still a long way to go, and now wasn't the time to reminisce. The endless sea of trees spread, and the weather was sometimes sunny and sometimes rainy. Suddenly, a wriggling shadow appeared on the horizon, connecting with the thick fog and clouds in the sky. Was it a mountain? No, it was a tree. Towering banyan trees stood tall, and each one was like a tall mountain. Thick fog pervaded the foot of the mountain, and the dark green canopy intersected with each other, like an endless sea of clouds. Aerial roots intersected and grew, like a horned dragon soaring over the mountains and rivers. Li Qingshan couldn't help but stop and look up, but he couldn't see the end of it. Even though he already knew that the banyan tree king's body was incomparably huge and stretched for tens of thousands of miles, he still couldn't help but exclaim at this moment. So big. Little Phoenix exclaimed, "It's much bigger than second elder father." "It seems too big," Little An said. Li Qingshan was slightly startled, and also nodded. "A little. What do you mean, isn't it good to be big?" Little Phoenix asked curiously. "It's not bad, but it's not all good either." "Aren't you very small?" Li Qingshan said with a smile. If it was in the past, he wouldn't have noticed anything strange, and would only be amazed. In the normal state of Little Phoenix, even including its tail feathers, its body was less than 10 feet, and the divine Wutong tree couldn't compare to any of the banyan trees here. The Great Whale King's body was only 10,000 feet, and compared to it, the banyan tree king was a little too big. Even though banyan trees had the natural ability to form a forest by itself, it wasn't easy for them to expand to such a large scale, and it was unknown how much effort they had put in. When Li Qingshan saw this sea of trees, he no longer had any doubts about the strength of the banyan tree king, and even felt that he might be the strongest existence in the 9 provinces. These great banyan trees weren't simply extending, but faintly formed a kind of formation, forming a domain of its own. Even if the Dragon King of the Sea entered this sea of trees, he would only end up with a grievance. However, what cultivators pursued was a qualitative change, to condense power to break through to the next realm, and not a quantitative change. The horizontal development of the banyan tree king really made people scratch their heads in confusion. If he used all this effort on his main body, perhaps he would have already ascended. "Who are you?" "This is the territory of towering Sky City." The sea of trees in the distance suddenly rippled, and a green-skinned giant with wood grain all over its body stood up, and looked at Li Qingshan with vigilance. "This place doesn't welcome humans." "Giant lumberman tribe," Li Qingshan said curiously. Moreover, the aura emitted by this giant lumberman had clearly gone through 3 heavenly tribulations, and was also a giant lumberman king. Just now, he was shocked by this sea of trees, and the aura of the giant lumberman had perfectly integrated into the sea of trees, so he didn't notice it for a moment. At this time, the sea of trees trembled, and the clouds dispersed. The trees beside the giant lumberman king stood up one after another, and turned into green-skinned giants. Most of their gazes fell on the little phoenix, and their eyes were full of surprise. After all, the legendary phoenix was rare, but they were all silent, and it was unknown whether they were communicating with their divine sense. "We are the guests of the banyan tree king, and we are on our way to towering Sky City." Li Qingshan recalled that many years ago, he once told a giant lumberman that he would one day visit his hometown. Although it probably wasn't here, it could be considered as fulfilling a wish. "Guest." The giant lumberman king frowned. He did not believe he had the right to do that. Instead, he felt that the 2 behind him were a great cultivator who had undergone 3 heavenly tribulations, while the other seemed to be a legendary phoenix. They were more worthy of the banyan tree king receiving them. At this moment, a ripple appeared in the distance, spreading through the sea of trees. The Banyan Tree King's ancient voice rang through the surroundings. "Esteemed guests have arrived. Forgive me for not going out to greet you." In that moment, all the diamonds and other folk in the sea of trees knew about Li Qingshan's arrival. The giant lumberman was shocked. In his memory, only the successive kings of Southern Yu would receive such a courteous reception when they arrived at the Sea of Trees for the first time after ascending to the throne. Li Qingshan shook his head with a smile. "You're so polite. I'm afraid I won't even dare to enter. Ha 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 ha, I'm just afraid that I'm not a good host. Please don't take offense, little friend Qingshan." The Banyan Tree King laughed heartily. Although he knew about Li Qingshan's personality, he still felt very relieved when he saw that his attitude was the same as before, without any change. "If there's no fine wine, please don't take offense." Li Qingshan also laughed heartily. "Then slow down a little. I'll definitely let you drink to your heart's content. Since you're an esteemed guest of the Tree King, please come and have a drink." The giant lumberman king revealed a warm and friendly smile and raised his hand in invitation. "All right." Li Qingshan took a step and entered the Sea of Trees, arriving in the kingdom of the giant lumberjacks. With a boom, a huge object smashed in front of Li Qingshan. It was over 3 meters tall and was engraved with many simple patterns. The giant lumberman king sat with his legs crossed, holding a similar object in his hand. It was actually a wine cup carved from wood. Faint, green alcohol rippled within it, giving off a heavy fragrance. "This is solid wood wine, an excellent brew that only the giant lumberjacks have. You can't drink it anywhere else. Please, fellow Daoist." The giant lumberman king finished speaking and drank the wine in one gulp. He then said meaningfully, "If you can't finish it, just have a taste. There's still a long way to go to towering Sky City." If the Tree King wanted to treat him with great hospitality, he would definitely not neglect it. However, he was a little curious and unwilling to accept it. He wanted to see how great Li Qingshan was. The other giant lumberjacks also did not remain silent. Some urged, "Drink, drink. If you don't finish it, then it'll be our fault for not being a good host, and we won't be able to answer to the Tree King. After this cup, there are still 3 more cups." Others advised, "You're so small, how can you drink so much wine? If you can't finish it, then forget it. Don't force yourself." "I'll drink." The little phoenix flew towards the wine cup. How can a son fight over wine with his father? Li Qingshan grabbed the little phoenix's wings and kicked the bottom of the huge wine cup. The light green wine immediately poured down like a small waterfall. Li Qingshan opened his mouth and inhaled. The wine flowed into his mouth, and he also drank it in one gulp. "You do have some alcohol tolerance." The giant lumberman king was slightly startled. It was not because of Li Qingshan's drinking, but because the little phoenix just now had pounced at a speed that was even faster than an ordinary demon king. Even he did not have this confidence. To be treated as an honored guest by the Tree King, he was indeed not an ordinary person. Still far from it. Wine. The wine was filled again. Li Qingshan drank 3 big cups in a row, causing the surrounding giant lumberjacks to cheer. Only the little phoenix cried out in dissatisfaction, "I want to drink too." Bang! A huge wine cup fell in front of the little phoenix. He shouted with joy and directly dived into the wine. The other giant lumberjacks also joined in and drank to their heart's content. Li Qingshan drank to his heart's content until there was not a drop left in the giant lumberjack's wine. The giant lumberjacks were all drunk on the ground. Just now, they would wave goodbye and continue on their way to sky-reaching city. The giant lumberman king watched Li Qingshan's figure disappear into the Sea of Trees and shook his head. He really did not understand. Suddenly remembering something, he cried out in pain, "Ouch, my wine." The Sea of Trees was deep and serene and filled with mist, but it was also full of strange and dazzling scenery. Li Qingshan leaped from treetop to treetop, but before he could travel more than 10 li, a black shadow rushed out of the soil under the tree and blocked his way. It turned out to be a thin, dark-skinned man covered in scales and armor. He was a demon marshal of some unknown creature, and he carried a large bag on his back. "Have a taste." The demon marshal opened the bag, and inside were thousands of colorful insects, some wriggling, some crawling, and some flying. It looked rather terrifying. Sure. Li Qingshan casually grabbed a red-shelled insect and threw it into his mouth. With a light bite, the juice flowed out, but it was sweet and pleasant, even better than honey. He tasted them one by one. These insects were sour, sweet, spicy, and salty, each with its own taste. The little phoenix did not like it at first, but seeing Li Qingshan eating happily, he also couldn't help but come over to have a taste. Along the way, Li Qingshan came across countless other folk tribes, diamonds, and diamonds. They brought out all sorts of strange things to entertain him. Some even traveled over thousands of kilometers to receive him, prepared with alcohol and delicacies, waiting on the path he had to pass by. He basically received them one after another. Chapter 979. When it's time to strike, I strike. I charge through the 9 provinces in a flurry. As Li Qingshan traveled, his drunkenness turned into something else. His loud singing shattered the silence of the jungle, startling countless birds. Before he knew it, he had already traveled for 3 days and 3 nights. Who knew how much fine alcohol he had drunk and who knew how many exotic foods he had eaten? He passed by another great banyan tree, and his field of vision suddenly expanded. There were no longer any trees before him, only huge, intertwined roots that resembled dragons, forming a huge maze on the ground. Leaping onto the top of a tree and gazing into the distance, his vision was blocked by a tall, greenish-gray mountain. The mountain was uneven, but it gave off a neat feeling. Looking to the left and right, he could not see the end of it. Raising his head, his vision was blocked by the clouds, so he could not see how high it was. What a strange mountain, Li Qingshan said drunkenly. The little phoenix on his back was already completely drunk, crying out a few times in a daze. Along the way, he had passed by quite a few tall mountains, but this was the first time he had come across such a large, strange mountain. All the mountains and rivers he had seen in his life could only be regarded as dwarfs compared to this. That's not a mountain. Little and drank quite a lot with him, but his gaze remained empty. If it's not a mountain, then what is it? Have you forgotten why you've come here? Do you really think I'm drunk? Ha ha ha, just kidding. I've obviously come to Towering City to see the Banyan Tree King. When Li Qingshan reached there, he suddenly shuddered. He powered the spirit turtle's method of sea suppression and temporarily suppressed his drunkenness. His eyes narrowed, and he gazed upwards. His gaze pierced through the clouds, reaching high into the sky. His eyes suddenly widened. How was this a mountain? It was clearly a tree, a great banyan tree that blotted out the sun. It was where the Banyan Tree King's original body resided. He had been moving through the forest the entire time, and the great banyan trees were like mountains in the first place. In his half-drunken state, he actually failed to sense that he had arrived beneath the Banyan Tree King's feet, mistaking it for a mountain. What, you don't recognize me now that you've seen me? The Banyan Tree King's laughter came from high up in the sky, dispersing the layers of clouds and mist. The Banyan Tree King's majestic figure was completely revealed in front of Li Qingshan. A majestic presence surged forth. It was not the presence of the Banyan Tree King, his presence had also melded perfectly with the world around them, but the sensation of a behemoth naturally emanating, as if it was a heavenly pillar of legend that held up the firmament. Li Qingshan sobered up a lot. He praised, "What a great Banyan Tree King." The Banyan Tree King smiled and said, "It's just a superficial appearance. I'm not as capable as you, little friend. I've finally seen your true appearance. No wonder it's called Towering Sky City," Li Qingshan said. There were only a few people in the entire 9 prefectures who could describe him, who was 7,000 feet tall, as vigorous. Originally, he thought the Banyan Tree King should not be so huge since it had developed so many branches. It was even possible that it was the same size as other banyan trees. Now that he had seen it in person, who knew how many times larger it was? Only the great whale king he had seen in the South Sea could rival it. However, the feeling of length and height was completely different. 30,000 feet was only a few dozen kilometers on flat ground, but it was completely different when it was placed vertically. Even the highest peak in the world of Li Qingshan's past life was less than 30,000 feet, and it was on a plateau. It was not that tall in the first place. However, the banyan tree king before him truly towered over 30,000 feet. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, he would have struggled to imagine a sight like this. "Why don't you come up? Don't tell me you've drunk too much and can't fly anymore," the banyan tree king said. "I'm coming." Li Qingshan unfurled his wings and flew up. Little and followed close behind. Having arrived several thousand feet in the air, he had just caught a glimpse of the banyan tree king's appearance. Li Qingshan raised an eyebrow. Sun vines. A colossal, golden vine wrapped around the banyan tree king. It was like a legendary golden dragon, shining with a faint, golden light. No wonder it seemed much brighter under the endless shade. Li Qingshan could not help but feel rather confused. The roots of the sun vines were directly inserted into the tree, absorbing nourishment from the banyan tree king's body. It definitely did not benefit the banyan tree king's cultivation at all, so why did it allow it to wrap itself around him? When he first met the banyan tree king, he had received 2 requests, which were to get rid of insects and to loosen the sun vines. He knew that the sun vines were an extremely vicious parasitic plant. They could absorb all spiritual energy and basically did not fear any attacks from techniques. If it was a branch, it could still be used for some defense, but who could oppose the banyan tree king in the center of the forest? Who was bold enough to oppose the banyan tree king? Let alone the banyan tree king's personal strength, Li Qingshan had seen no fewer than 7 mutant kings and demon kings along the way. Coupled with those who had yet to show themselves, the forest was basically impregnable. Though, if such a huge sun vine attacks, it'll really be terrifying, Li Qingshan thought. He flew to the top of the tree, and a grand palace appeared before him. The banyan tree king assumed human form, currently waiting before the palace. However, Li Qingshan's gaze landed on the banyan tree king's side. A woman hugged the banyan tree king's arm and rested her head on the banyan tree king's shoulder. She seemed extremely intimate. "Lover. Mistress. I didn't think he'd like that." Li Qingshan wondered inside. The woman was beautiful and enchanting. Her figure was slender and soft, with a resplendent smile on her face. Her golden hair draped down, and there was a beautiful sunflower in her hair. She seemed so radiant, but Li Qingshan instinctively raised his guard. He was reluctant to approach her. Suddenly, he understood. As it turned out, she was the sun vine, and the presence she gave off was clearly that of a demon king. "Qingshan, are you satisfied with the reception?" The banyan tree king approached him. The golden-haired woman followed him closely, remaining close to him the entire time. Extremely satisfied, Li Qingshan patted his belly and burped. He looked at the golden-haired woman and asked, "May I ask who you are?" "You can just call me Madam Ting. This is my Lord Tree." The banyan tree king was about to introduce her, but Madam Ting beat him to it. Her gentle voice was like a vine winding around him, and her gaze only glanced at Li Qingshan and little and gently. Even the little phoenix did not make her look at them for long. Immediately, she returned her gaze to the banyan tree king's face. Her face was filled with sweetness and attachment. Li Qingshan felt his teeth ache. A scene like this was rare even among human couples, let alone 2 demon kings. However, a hint of envy flashed across Little An's eyes. He did not envy the intimacy, but rather the stubbornness of relying on each other and never being separated. The banyan tree king seemed to be used to it. He welcomed Li Qingshan into the palace as he asked, "How does your journey feel?" "I feel great," Li Qingshan said sincerely. It was not only because of the good wine and delicious food, but also because of the unique civilization that existed in this forest. Just the different races of mutants that he had encountered alone numbered several tens. Although there was also hunting and killing, there was a sense of a natural cycle. Regardless of whether they were strong or weak, every life form had a place to live and reproduce. When Li Qingshan spoke of his thoughts, the banyan tree king laughed heartily. It was obvious that he was proud of his life. "However, you seem to have expanded too much. I'm afraid this is not conducive to ascension." "See, old man, I told you that you were wrong. Even this little brother who came for the first time could see the problem. What good is this for your cultivation? What do those mutants and monsters have to do with you? Madame Teng complained. I don't live for benefits. Besides, if I thought like this 5,000 years ago, you wouldn't be here now. The banyan tree king smiled. His attitude was gentle and amiable. But you already have me now, Madame Teng said. Senior has a broad mind and a heart of universal love. It's admirable. Li Qingshan praised. Although he wasn't a person who loved universal love, he admired the banyan tree king very much. Moreover, he could be considered as a direct beneficiary of the banyan tree king's love. You talk too much. Madame Teng glared at Li Qingshan in displeasure. Don't be rude. The banyan tree king waved his hand and said, I have something to discuss with Qingshan. You can leave first. I won't. Madame Ting acted coquettishly until the banyan tree king frowned. Only then did Madame Ting reluctantly leave his body and disappear. The banyan tree king said to Li Qingshan, I've let you see a joke. Senior is old but vigorous. Junior admires you even more. Li Qingshan teased mischievously. The banyan tree king shook his head helplessly and invited Li Qingshan into the main hall of the palace. I'm not as great as you think. I'd rather give up on ascension to help the common people. This time, I invited you here because I have a request. It's not a request. What does fellow Daoist need help with? Just tell me. If I can help, I will definitely do my best. Li Qingshan's expression turned solemn, but he didn't dare to agree. Although it was his principle to repay kindness and enmity, something that could make the banyan tree king request was definitely not a small matter. He could only treat it cautiously. Otherwise, it would be even more inappropriate to go back on his word. The banyan tree king pondered for a while and sighed to the sky. How can all living things not have requests? Even if it was a tree, it would still beg for sunlight and rain. When it gains spirituality and turns into a monster, its requests will be even more. Using my own strength to protect all living things is my wish. But since I've entered this path of cultivation, I naturally want to find a path to walk. But you should be able to see that the path I'm looking for is not to transcend the tribulation and ascend. Then what path is it? Li Qingshan asked curiously. Apart from transcending the tribulation, was there any other path to take? Since you've seen the golden cicada, did he use the well as an example and say that he wanted to jump out of the well? That's right. This is what he's looking for. Jumping out of the well is to transcend the tribulation and ascend to a higher and vaster world. Which cicada doesn't want to break out of the soil, break free from its shell, and spread its wings to fly? But I'm just a tree. I just want to protect this part of the world. Little An said calmly, although the lifespan of the demon race is much longer than that of humans, and the grass elves are much longer than ordinary demons, it's not endless. There will come a day when it's exhausted. That's right. It's not that simple to protect this part of the world. If it's a dead end, I'm afraid I don't have the determination. After all, I'm also one of the living things. How can I not have the desire to live? Longevity is the most fundamental pursuit of all cultivators. Then what should we do? Chapter 980. In the quiet towering sky city, every carved railing and painted building had their own unique craftsmanship. Exquisite works of art from the 100 races were displayed here. The entire city did not look like a residence, but more like a museum. The main hall of the towering sky city was where its essence lay. However, the people in the hall were not in the mood to enjoy it. Li Qingshan's astonished voice echoed in the empty hall. Transform into a well. Senior, do you want to form a world of your own, or merge with the 9 provinces? Little An seemed to have understood something. Since I want to stay in this world forever, it's naturally the latter. However, it's not merging. If it does, it'll be over. The banyan tree king then looked at Li Qingshan. If I use the Azura field in your hand as an example, I want to become an artifact spirit. I want to use my own heart as the heart of the heavens and use my own consciousness to replace the consciousness of this world. Only now did Li Qingshan understand why the banyan tree king kept expanding his branches without caring about the price. It was like moss growing on the walls of a well. What an inconceivable ambition. But what do you want to do? Could it be that you want to expand to cover the entire 9 provinces? This was impossible. Even if the humans did not obstruct the Banyan Tree King's actions, he did not know how long it would take him. His lifespan was definitely not that long. Of course not. The Banyan Tree King smiled and waved his hand. He turned around and walked into the depths of the hall until he arrived in front of a mental map of the 9 provinces. Every world has its own laws. If you want to replace the consciousness of this world, you must first understand the laws of this world. However, the laws of a world are profound and complicated. It is not something that can be completely understood with the so-called comprehension ability. You must have a large number of calculations. Although too many branches are not beneficial to cultivation, it can greatly increase the speed of calculations. Li Qingshan had a strange expression. The thousands of kilometers of forest he had walked through had turned into a hole in his mind. Every branch of the banyan tree was both a collector and a calculator of information. Countless pieces of information were transmitted through every root and finally gathered here to decipher the code of heaven and earth. This did not sound like something a monster would do. The Banyan Tree King in front of him was like a 3-dimensional projection. Its real identity was a giant supercomputer. No wonder you're known for your profound wisdom. However, what's the result of deducing the laws of heaven and earth? The result is not bad. At the very least, it is very helpful for divination. However, Cheongchi's trap is far beyond my divination ability. The difference between our levels is too great. I believe you already know that there might be a time trap in this bet. Millimeter Li Qingshan nodded. If I can succeed, I will be able to lend you a hand. The Banyan Tree King said. A single demon king was nothing more than an ant in front of Cheongchi. However, if it transformed into a world, even Cheongchi wouldn't be able to go against it directly. I also hope that you can succeed, but how can I help you? I don't understand any laws of heaven and earth. Li Qingshan said. Compared to something as troublesome as comprehending the laws of heaven and earth, he preferred to use brute force to destroy the laws of heaven and earth. Just comprehending the laws of heaven and earth is useless. Although you can better adapt to this world and use these laws in various aspects, it's just like how even if you see through every grain on the walls of a well, you won't be able to turn it into a well. Comprehending is just the first step. Furthermore, with my current realm, it's impossible for me to completely comprehend it. It's like an ant trying to shake a tree. The Banyan Tree King sighed. Even if he used all sorts of methods to make up for it, a third heavenly tribulation realm was still too low. Isn't that a dead knot? Li Qingshan asked. There's always a way out. An ant can shake a tree. Even a dead knot can be solved. Do you know of the mountain water divine seal? The Banyan Tree King asked. I know. I've even refined a few before. Li Qingshan seemed to have understood something. From a certain perspective, the mountain god seal and water god seal were the condensation of the laws of heaven and earth. Then do you know of the 9 cauldrons? The Banyan Tree King asked again. Who doesn't know about the national treasures of Great Shia? It's said that they've been forged from all the god seals in the world. They can suppress the fortune of the 9 provinces and make the world devoid of gods. Li Qingshan came to a realization. Grasping a single god seal meant grasping a river or a mountain range. If he grasped all of the divine seals of mountains and rivers, would he be able to grasp the 9 provinces? Sir, you want to refine the 9 cauldrons and become a god on the spot. That's roughly what I'm thinking, but I don't have that great of an appetite. My current plan is to refine the Mist Province cauldron first, which will greatly extend my lifespan and ensure my own survival. Afterwards, I'll comprehend the laws of the world a step further and use that as a breakthrough until the day I succeed. Sir, you want me to go to the King of Southern Yu's estate and steal the Mist Province cauldron? Li Qingshan frowned slightly. Even if the King of Southern Yu's estate was not as tightly guarded as Towering City, it was definitely not a place easy to enter or leave, let alone the fact that he had to bring his supreme treasure with him. It really was not a simple matter, and regardless of whether he succeeded or not, he would directly fall out with the King of Southern Yu. That's not it. The banyan tree king waved his hand, and the surroundings twisted and changed. He arrived in a huge hollow in the center of the banyan tree. The Mist Province Cauldron. Li Qingshan's eyes narrowed. All he saw was an ink-green, three-legged cauldron sitting in the center of the hollow. Countless famed mountains, great rivers, and wondrous treasures were engraved on the cauldron. It was a style unique to the Mist Province. Gazing deeply, the flat image seemed to turn into countless mountains and rivers, buried deep within the mist. It was one of the 9 cauldrons, the Mist Province Cauldron. The Mist Province Cauldron was not particularly large, but it gave off an extremely heavy feeling, as if it was the condensation of the Mist Province that spanned 100,000 kilometers. Even with countless aerial routes wrapped around it, it struggled to hide its profound light. I obtained this cauldron 5,000 years ago. The banyan tree king stroked the inscriptions on the cauldron gently, removing some of the roots wrapped around it. Sir, why haven't you been able to refine the cauldron? Li Qingshan was slightly surprised. The Great Xia Empire had only been established for 5,000 years, so didn't that mean the king of Southern Yu had given the cauldron to him as soon as it was forged? It's not time yet. The 9 cauldrons are a single entity, possessing the power to rule the world. Let alone refining it, even shaking it will be difficult. In the past few years, I've only been deriving its structure in preparation for refining it in the future. Has the time come now? Take a closer look. The banyan tree king pointed at the cauldron. Only then did Li Qingshan see a few black spots on the cauldron. They seemed like rust, but he would not be able to tell if he did not look carefully. These are demon caverns. That's right. The laws of the world that these demon caverns destroy and corrode this world have also manifested on the Mist Province Cauldron. This is where the cauldron's weakness lies. What can I do for you? Destroy the Mist Province Cauldron. Before he had seen the Mist Province Cauldron, Li Qingshan really did not believe there was anything in the world he could not destroy, but now, he was no longer that confident. I've forged it after so much difficulty. Will it still be effective even if I destroy it? Chapter 981. But Senior said the 9 cauldrons are a single entity. If we attack the Mist Province Cauldron, won't the other cauldrons react? Little and noticed the problem. Exactly. In particular, the Dragon Province Cauldron is the leader of the 9 cauldrons, so it will suppress the other 8 cauldrons. Normally, destroying one cauldron is equivalent to destroying all 9 cauldrons. However, I can temporarily cut off the connection between the Mist Province Cauldron and the other cauldrons. The banyan tree king smiled. After all, forging the 9 cauldrons was my suggestion in the first place. Li Qingshan and Little and looked at one another. This plan sure was far-reaching. All right, then allow me to assist you. Li Qingshan was about to take a step forward. Hold on. I've already waited for several millennia, so there's no need for me to be in such a hurry. This matter needs to be completed in one go. You've just gone through a great battle, so your vitality still hasn't completely recovered. You might as well rest for a few more days and recover to peak condition. The banyan tree king suddenly sighed. His eyes were rather worried. I also have some matters that I need to deal with on my end. Yeah, fair enough. This was the first time Li Qingshan had seen the banyan tree king react like that. He had no idea what matters he had yet to deal with after preparing for several millennia. However, it was inappropriate for him to ask. If there's anything I can help you with, feel free to ask. The banyan tree king nodded and recovered his composure. Take these spiritual stones for now. When Li Qingshan heard spiritual stones, he did not pay too much attention to them. He had seen plenty of spiritual stones, and they were basically worthless to him now. He even found it strange why the banyan tree king had suddenly become so stingy. Only when a few spiritual stones landed in his hand did he become surprised. The spiritual stones all gave off a faint, green mist. They did not seem particularly special, but the spiritual energy they contained was tremendous and pure, enough to rival the demon heart of a demon king and the aura of a monk king. Refining demon hearts and relics was an extremely troublesome matter. It was inevitable that there would be many negative effects, and even inner demons would be born. However, These spirit stones did not have these problems at all. Li Qingshan tried to probe them with his divine sense and found that these spirit stones did not stop there. They also contained a trace of the mysterious laws of heaven and earth. If he could refine and absorb them, he would definitely gain endless benefits. Many thanks, fellow Daoist. Is there anything else? Don't be greedy, kid. These spiritual stones didn't form naturally. They all come from the Mist Province cauldron. Over the past several thousand years, only a few have condensed. Go. The Banyan Tree King waved his hand with a smile. Li Qingshan put away the spirit stones and casually cupped his fists. His figure distorted and disappeared. Only the Banyan Tree King remained in the empty tree hole. He turned around and gazed at the Mist Province cauldron before suddenly letting out a long sigh. Why aren't you coming out yet? I'm the problem you want to deal with, right? Madame Teng's lingering voice rang out in the Banyan Tree King's ears. Her arms wrapped around him naturally, and the tips of her fingers gently touched his furrowed brows. Do you really have to sigh like that? Once I refine the Mist Province cauldron, I'll assist you in ascending with everything I have, said the Banyan Tree King. No, we'll ascend together. Madame Teng wrapped herself even tighter around him. Stop pestering me. This won't benefit you at all. We'll part ways one day. The Banyan Tree King patted her back. No, we'll ascend together, Madame Teng repeated stubbornly before pleading again. Old man, I'm begging you, all right? Sigh, you're still too young. The Banyan Tree King closed his eyes gently. In a daze, he saw the scene from 5,000 years ago when the valiant king of the 9 provinces gave him a tiny, wilted, golden vine as a gift. This sun vine is a natural variant. It doesn't belong to this world in the first place. If even you aren't willing to take it in, there won't be a place for it in the 9 provinces anymore, said the Lord of the World. If regular trees were entangled by the sun vines, they would wither and die in a few days. Only relatively powerful grass elves could endure their entanglement. However, as long as they possessed some intelligence, who would be willing to let them entangle themselves? They would definitely eliminate them as soon as possible. As a result, the Banyan Tree King allowed it to cling to him. Many other folk and diamonds under his command wanted to kill it, but he stopped them all. I can let it share some of the dew with me, and it won't harm me at all. Why must I kill it? She did not let down his benevolence, constantly absorbing the tree sap and strengthening day by day. In less than 300 years, she underwent the heavenly tribulation and became a demon general, becoming a demon king 800 years ago. To diamonds, this cultivation speed was startlingly fast, let alone the fact that she was a plant demon who cultivated the slowest. Apart from her natural talent, the Banyan Tree King's sacrifice played a crucial role. He allowed her to absorb the tree sap day and night, guiding her carefully from the moment she gained intelligence. It was no less than what the divine Wutong tree had invested into the little phoenix. His uncomplaining efforts were rewarded as well. She became the final and strongest barrier of Towering City. Although it had only been 500 years since she underwent the third heavenly tribulation, her strength far surpassed regular demon kings. And, under her intentional control, it was no longer a one-sided devouring. Instead, it assisted his cultivation, forming a harmonious symbiosis. This was another victory for the Banyan Tree King in upholding his principles. The other folk and diamonds who wanted to kill her all admired his wisdom and breadth of mind. However, even with his wisdom, it was impossible for him to calculate everything, especially when it came to sentient beings and the subtle changes in their emotions. Unknowingly, she began to address herself as his wife, causing everyone to call her Madame Ting. He had treated it as a joke, but he did not expect her obsession to be so strong. I don't live for benefits either. Madame Ting hugged the Banyan Tree King tightly, but her pursed lips revealed her stubborn determination. Li Qingshan and Little and had just been moved back to Towering City. They were about to walk around and take a good look around when thousands of sun vines that were as slender as snakes and as bright as gold swarmed in through the window. Madame Teng? Li Qingshan immediately pressed down on the hilt of his saber. From the first time he saw Madame Teng, he knew that he could not treat her as a regular demon king. Back in the Azura field, he He felt it was dangerous even when facing a sun vine that did not possess any intelligence at all. Even the powerful foundation establishment cultivators under Prince Saiching were entangled to death, so Madame Teng's strength could be deduced. Although plant-type diamonds like her had the disadvantage of not being able to move freely, they were extremely powerful in their own territory. If it were not for the fact that he trusted the Banyan Tree King very much, he would not have come to Towering City at all. However, he did not have any relations with Madame Teng. The sun vines did not attack. Instead, they intertwined and formed a golden staircase. One of the vines even twisted into the word please. Li Qingshan and Little An exchanged glances and stepped onto the staircase. They arrived in the sky above Towering City. Countless golden vines quickly weaved into a golden building, and the golden staircase pointed towards it. The moment Li Qingshan stepped into the building, the door was closed. He cupped his hands and said, "Madame Teng, how may I help you? I wouldn't dare to help you, but I have something to ask of you. Although I don't think you can destroy the Mist Province cauldron, please mind your own business." Madame Teng's voice echoed through the building. She called it a request, but it was very rude. Li Qingshan was never one to be provoked. Coupled with the fact that he was still tipsy, he laughed loudly and said, "I do have some confidence. Ignorant child. You think you're helping him, but you're actually harming him?" Madame Teng said angrily. "Oh, what do you mean?" Li Qingshan asked curiously. "You're preventing him from ascending? He doesn't want to ascend either. As the saying goes, it's better to be the head of a chicken than the tail of a cow. Instead of becoming the lackey of those demon gods after ascending, he'd rather be with the world and be the god of the 9 provinces. Don't listen to that old man's nonsense. Since ancient times, no one has ever succeeded in something like this. Do you know what the consequences are if you fail? In the ancient times, before the 9 cauldrons appeared, countless godly seals were scattered all over the world. There were people who dreamed of this and wantonly conquered and collected the godly seals. In the end, they were devoured by the godly seals, and their souls were destroyed, Madame Teng said. Li Qingshan believed her. Being the god of a mountain or a river and being the god of a prefecture were 2 completely different concepts. Just like how it was easy to rule a village or a town, it was impossible to rule a country without the corresponding strength to be a commoner. This was why there was the mountain god seal and the water god seal but not the sea god seal. The sea was too vast, and there were countless mountain ranges at the bottom of the sea. It was not a place that ordinary demon kings could control. If they tried to forcefully condense the godly seal, they would only be throwing their lives away. However, the Banyan Tree King's ultimate goal was to encompass all of this and control all of the mountains and seas. It was indeed like a daydream. However, since the old man dares to do this, he must have a certain amount of confidence. Just because no one has ever done it doesn't mean it can't be done. The old man's wisdom is profound, and some people can't compare to him. Damn it! How dare you speak to me like this? Do you believe that I won't pester you to death? Every single sun vine in the building wriggled. Li Qingshan immediately felt his strength disperse uncontrollably. If it were not for the support of the strength of the earth, he probably would have run out of strength in no time. He immediately understood that she had already turned this extraordinary talent into an ability. It was truly terrifying. However, he was unfazed. He said proudly, "I don't believe it." In the end, Madame Teng could not lay her hands on the guest invited by the Banyan Tree King. She sighed and said, "You really don't understand. You've come to help him because he is the Banyan Tree King. If he succeeds, will he still be the same person?" Li Qingshan fell silent. He had discussed the will of the world with the Banyan Tree King many times, and they had many guesses. In particular, whether the so-called self existed in the world or not. Although he had once received an invitation from the Azura realm, he did not feel that he was speaking to the Azura realm. However, at the very least, one thing was certain. The will of the world was definitely different from the will of living beings. Therefore, after the Banyan Tree King succeeded, no one could say for sure what would happen to him. However, once he started on this path, there was no possibility of turning back. Do you understand now? I'm doing everything for his own good. Don't be a hindrance here. I will get him to give you the fruit of wisdom that he promised you. Go back to your Qingju. Madame Teng's voice turned gentle as she guided him patiently. The towering tree remained silent. It did not interrupt this conversation, as if it was waiting for his decision. Chapter 982. Li Qingshan wavered slightly after hearing Madame Teng's words. However, he asked himself, will I no longer be me once I reach beyond the 9 heavens? As a result, he no longer hesitated. Only people with unbelievable dreams would believe in another unbelievable dream. You don't care about his life or death at all, which is why you can say something like that. Madame Teng was furious. For a moment, killing intent permeated the air. Li Qingshan said, if you really care about him so much, you should be lending him a hand instead of obstructing him. Shut up. I'm doing this for our future. The sun vines twisted and danced like snakes, swarming over and wrapping around him. However, the spirit turtle's profound shell stopped them. I think you're doing this for your own future. Li Qingshan sneered. With a clang, he drew his blade. Little and gripped the hilt of his sword firmly. The Buddha slaying sword was rather effective against opponents with large bodies and great recovery. To Madame Teng, even if Li Qingshan cut through all the vines here, he would not be able to harm her at all. Meanwhile, the Buddha slaying sword only needed to cut through a single vine, and it would be enough to extend its body and harm her. However, Xiaowen's emotions fluctuated in a peculiar manner, so she hesitated slightly with her strike. All right, stop messing around. At this moment, the Banyan Tree King's voice rang out. There was some helplessness in his voice, but it left no room for doubt. You only know how to side with outsiders. Madame Teng backed away reluctantly. Thank you for your trust. That's extremely precious to me, the Banyan Tree King said to Li Qingshan. You're welcome. I'm still hoping that you'll succeed and assist me in the future. Li Qingshan smiled. That day will definitely come. The two demon kings eagerly anticipated that day. Little and gazed at the sun vines wrapped tightly around the tree and sighed inside. When Li Qingshan returned to towering Sky City, the originally tranquil and peaceful atmosphere changed. He keenly felt the omnipresent hostility and knew that Madame Teng hated him. He smiled and didn't take it seriously. In the blink of an eye, a few days had passed. Li Qingshan had absorbed a spiritual stone from the Banyan Tree King, and his vitality had all recovered to peak condition. He stood before the Mist Province cauldron again. Are you ready? Asked the Banyan Tree King. All right. But is fellow Daoist really going to do that? Li Qingshan asked. It's not what I want, but I have no choice. The Banyan Tree King sighed. All right then. Li Qingshan nodded and no longer hesitated. He took a step forward and stood before the Mist Province cauldron, but he did not strike immediately. Instead, he stared at the engravings on the cauldron deeply. Gradually, nothing else existed in his eyes. All that remained was the Mist Province cauldron. The endless sea of trees, mountains, and rivers all appeared before him. It was as if he was not facing a cauldron, but the Mist Province that spanned 100,000 kilometers. The tremendous pressure became more and more obvious. Before he had even struck, he felt like he was carrying a mountain on his back. And, behind the Mist Province was an even vaster world. That was the 9 provinces of the world, like they were a single entity. It was unshakable. It was definitely unshakable. Li Qingshan pursed his lips and clenched his fists, allowing the power of tremors to constantly gather around him. His body trembled slightly, but he still did not strike, as if he was waiting for something. The Banyan Tree King nodded in satisfaction. If he were a regular demon king, he definitely would not be able to endure such tremendous pressure. He would either directly retreat in defeat or strike out blindly. He probably would not even be able to leave a mark on the Mist Province cauldron. The Banyan Tree King spread his arms. At that moment, every single banyan tree in the sea of trees that stretched for tens of thousands of kilometers trembled and swayed. The sound of water was deafening, surging like waves that approached from afar and gathered towards the Banyan Tree King. The aerial roots spread out madly, covering the walls of the tree hole densely. However, The aerial roots around the Mist Province cauldron rapidly receded, revealing the cauldron in its entirety. It glowed with magnificent light. Seal. The banyan tree king spat out a single word quietly, and the light from the cauldron dimmed. Li Qingshan's eyes lit up. Like a flash of lightning, all of the illusions of mountains and rivers shattered. There was still the Mist Province cauldron before him, as if it had been isolated from the 9 provinces. The pressure it brought him immediately decreased. He punched out with both fists and bellowed out, boom, thunk. A great sound rang out like a great bell, reaching thousands of kilometers away. Under the night sky, Yi Wei-yang stood high above the sea of trees. An inky, green pillar of light rushed into the air. It was even thicker and vaster than the banyan tree king's body, like a pillar that supported the heavens. With it as a foundation, a tremendous formation that enveloped tens of thousands of kilometers was activated. She frowned as if she was worried about something. She said with an almost indiscernible voice, "Don't." In the sea of trees, all the living beings either understood what was going on or were at a loss. They all gazed in the direction of towering city. Tens of thousands of kilometers away, the king of Southern Yu suddenly sensed something in the Silver Dragon King. He smiled. It's finally begun. The full-powered strike that Li Qingshan had prepared for a very long time only made the Mist Province cauldron tremble and leave behind 2 indiscernible imprints. There were a few cracks, but the moment he pulled his fist back, the cracks closed up. As it seemed, the Mist Province cauldron would be as good as new in the blink of an eye. However, the booms constantly echoed through the tree hole, slamming against his soul viciously like a series of questions, asking him why he was bold enough to offend the imperial authority of the heaven. It really is tough. Li Qingshan laughed. If the Mist Province cauldron did not respond at all, it would instead be far too boring. Roar. A tiger's roar drowned out the booms. Li Qingshan's blood surged, and his skin became scarlet red. The inscription of a beast spread across his forehead, forming a king character, the tiger demon's fury. Thump, thump, thump. The booms rang out endlessly, ringing through the surroundings. Li Qingshan's figure blurred, turning into a storm and bombarding the Mist Province cauldron furiously. In his fury, he still retained a sliver of clarity in his mind. The black specks on the cauldron healed much more slowly when they were damaged, as if they were the cauldron's lifeline. Apart from the initial probing, his punches had all landed on the black specks. The imprints constantly caved in, and the cracks rapidly spread until they became a crack. Suddenly, a streak of rainbow light shot out. Nice. The banyan tree king praised. He also used his full strength. Not only did he seal up the Mist Province cauldron, but he also mobilized transparent, jade-green aerial roots that wrapped around Li Qingshan's legs, channeling tremendous amounts of spiritual energy into his body. The tiger demon's fury was powerful, but it also placed a great burden on Li Qingshan. It could be said that if he wanted to injure his enemy, he would injure himself first. He could not maintain it for too long. However, with the banyan tree king's full support, the various negative effects were suppressed to the limit, allowing him to unleash his destructive power to his heart's content without any worry. Streaks of rainbow light shot out, and more cracks appeared on the Mist Province cauldron. At this moment, Madame Teng suddenly appeared in the tree hole. She was extremely stern. She had never expected Li Qingshan to actually possess such strength. She bit her lip and shot a vicious glance at the banyan tree king before making her way towards Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan seemed to be completely submerged in the pleasure of destroying the Mist Province cauldron. His back was completely unguarded. "Don't do anything stupid." The banyan tree king frowned. His voice was solemn and loud, as dignified as a god's. Madame Teng was immediately restrained, immobilized. However, she said disdainfully, "Damned old man, I might not be as clever as you, but you can't stop me either. Just obediently undergo the heavenly tribulation and ascend with me." She raised her right arm high into the air, and the sun vines around the great banyan tree suddenly tightened. A streak of golden light twisted and coiled around the great banyan tree, wrapping around the dark green light. The light immediately began to fade, while the golden light rapidly strengthened. Li Qingshan immediately felt the pressure from the Mist Province cauldron increase drastically. Even the cracks showed signs of closing up, so he gritted his teeth and continued his assault. If the banyan tree king were restrained, he would not be able to destroy the Mist Province cauldron alone. Why must you do this? Seeing how the plans of half his life were about to come to nothing, the banyan tree king let out a sigh and closed his eyes gently. Old man, I've let you down, but I will be with you forever. I'll make it up to you tenfold, 100-fold. Please forgive me. Madame Teng's voice came to a halt, and she vomited a mouthful of golden blood. A shiny, white blade protruded from her chest. Little An stood behind Madame Teng, gripping the hilt of his sword with one hand as his white clothes drifted about. The golden light around the pillar of light immediately collapsed. Even the huge sun vines that resembled golden dragons began to wither at a visible rate. Yi Wei Yang stared at this and smiled bitterly. At the very least, she should be glad that she did not have to do anything herself. Li Qingshan glanced around from the corner of his eye before continuing to destroy the Mist Province cauldron. Everything was going according to plan. The aura of death constantly spread, dyeing Madame Teng's face with a layer of grayish-white. She stared straight at the banyan tree king and asked in disbelief, "You really want me dead? I'm sorry, but I really can't think of any other way to stop you." The banyan tree king seemed to age a lot in that instant. His voice was particularly deep and ancient, but his eyes remained as determined as ever. He could not compromise with everything. Fine then. Madame Teng lowered her head powerlessly. The sunflower in her hair immediately wilted. She murmured to herself, "What are these 5,000 years?" Little An drew the Buddha slaying sword, and pale white flames rapidly swallowed Madame Teng. He raised his head and looked at Li Qingshan. The dazzling, rainbow light coated him with a resplendent ring of light. After who knew how long, Li Qingshan threw a punch into the Mist Province cauldron. Time seemed to freeze for a split second as thousands of colors erupted and flowed before him. Only then did he realize that the Mist Province cauldron had already shattered. Li Qingshan widened his eyes and saw a green heart in the shattered Mist Province cauldron. He came to a realization that this was the banyan tree king's demon core, and the tree hole happened to be where the heart of the banyan tree king resided. The heart of the tree absorbed the thousands of colors and suddenly shone with countless streaks of light. As a matter of fact, it even pierced through the thick tree trunk and produced a beautiful glow in the night sky, vaguely displaying the various sights of the Mist Province. In the end, it condensed into a map of the Mist Province, hovering in the air. The banyan tree king stood there without moving. Only the color of his eyes constantly changed. Li Qingshan frowned. Originally, the banyan tree king was the tranquility of a tree. Within the tranquility, he radiated with benevolence and life. Now, he was the tranquility of the sky, with a hint of emptiness within the tranquility. He viewed everything as nothing. Chapter 983. Success or failure all depended on this. At this moment, the banyan tree king's tremendous numbers came into play. Every single great banyan tree seemed to be an independent entity, yet they were also connected together through their countless roots. Tremendous amounts of information flowed through them. All of a sudden, each of the great banyan trees glowed with a colorful brilliance, and the vast forest turned into a beautiful sea of light. The diamonds and other folk who lived there all looked around in surprise. Then they saw the map of the Mist Province hanging high in the night sky slowly descend, growing closer and closer and becoming larger and larger. When they raised their heads, they could clearly see the countless mountains and rivers as if they were tangible. It was like the end of the world had arrived. Cries rose and fell in the sea of trees. Yi Wei Yang stood in the sea of trees and gazed at the descending Mist Province. She smiled. A mountain hung upside down, pressing down on her. She did not dodge, passing through it. The diamonds and other folk looked around in a panic, but they discovered that the disaster they were imagining did not happen. The Mist Province had merged with the sea of trees, swallowed by the sea of light. A while later, all of the light receded, and the forest returned to how it was before, as if nothing had happened at all. Only the kings could deeply sense the profound changes. They all beamed with joy and wished in the direction of towering city. The banyan tree king exhaled deeply. His eyes returned to their inky green, but his tree heart continued to shine resplendently. His aura became more and more distant, but it did not feel like his personality had changed drastically. Instead, it was a very natural form of growth and improvement. Congratulations, fellow Daoist. Congratulations. You've succeeded. Li Qingshan clasped his hands and congratulated. He admired the banyan tree king very much. Although it was not some natural divine tree, it had pushed its special characteristics to the limit. After several millennia of painstaking planning, it had created an unprecedented path, which made him very excited. It's just the first step. The banyan tree king waved his hand. However, once you take this step, the other 8 cauldrons will sense it. The imperial clan of the Dragon Province will definitely be furious, said Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan said. Great Xia wanted to rid the world of gods, yet the banyan tree king had directly become the god of the Mist Province and even destroyed their national treasure. It would be strange if they did not react at all. Don't worry, they won't attack. The banyan tree king's eyes flickered with the light of wisdom. He had already deduced the cause and effect of everything. Now, he could see it even more clearly. You're right, Li Qingshan said with a smile. The current banyan tree king had already stepped into a whole new realm. In the world of the 9 states, he was almost invincible. If the Great Xia dynasty wanted him to fall, it was likely that even the Great Xia dynasty could not afford to pay such a price. Is it worth it? Little An suddenly asked the banyan tree king. The banyan tree king was speechless. The atmosphere suddenly became heavy. Little An? Li Qingshan was slightly surprised, but he saw a rare expression of pity on her face. He could not help but sigh. There's nothing we can do about it. That Madame Teng has gone too far. Is it worth it? Little An did not look at Li Qingshan and asked further. The banyan tree king closed his eyes as if he was unable to face her gaze. The sun vines around him had already withered. His body had never been so light before, but he instead felt empty. He was rather unaccustomed to it. If it was not worth it, why would he make a choice like this? If it was worth it, why would the joy of success be unable to make up for this regret? 5,000 years of companionship was really nothing. Was it because he had put in too much effort, such that he could not treat it lightly? Or had he purposefully controlled certain changes in his emotions the entire time? Even though he could comprehend the profound laws of the world, he struggled to resolve these doubts. Forgive me, Senior. I've asked too much. Little An shook her head and returned to Li Qingshan's side. It's not worth it. The banyan tree king suddenly opened his eyes. Although there was pain in them, there was no confusion. But if I had to choose again, I would still do the same. Normally, Li Qingshan would definitely praise a reply like that. However, after glancing at Little An beside him, he felt that it was better to remain silent. He did not want to involve himself in other people's matters. I probably will never be able to understand such decisiveness, Little An said as she looked at Li Qingshan with her clear eyes. Li Qingshan's heart sank and the corner of his lips twitched. Fine, he had still gotten himself involved in the end. He tried hard to organize his words. Little An, you're thinking too much. Don't get into character so easily. You're not Madame Teng, and I'm not the banyan tree king. Of course, I'm not saying that you're wrong. Anyway. Sigh, it's really complicated. You've actually overestimated the power of this sword. I'm the same. Little An raised the Buddha slaying sword in her hand. Li Qingshan and the banyan tree king were both taken aback. They had personally witnessed the power of the Buddha slaying sword. 2 demon kings as powerful as the lords of yin and yang had been finished off with a single stroke, so how could they still overestimate its power? However, it was exactly because that sight was just too shocking that they overlooked many things. For example, back then, the lords of yin and yang had already fought Li Qingshan to the point of exhaustion. They had only managed to break free from Li Qingshan's suppression after so much difficulty, but before they could even get their revenge, Little An had already charged over. For example, the Buddha slaying sword. Although it possessed terrifying power, it actually countered 2 types of opponents the most. One was Buddhist cultivators, which was why it was called Buddha slaying. The other was existences of extreme yin and evil, such as corpses and demon folk, because the path of white bone and great beauty was still a Buddhist cultivation method after all. However, Madame Teng did not belong to either of these groups. She did not possess a body of flesh and blood. Although the Buddha-slaying sword countered her very much, it mostly ensured that every strike could injure her. In the past, the myriad poison ancestor had only been heavily injured when the Buddha-slaying sword pierced his chest, and he had almost fled back to the myriad poison cult. The soul nascence that escaped in the end was very spirited too. It took quite a lot of effort to deal with it. After being tempered by the heavenly tribulation, the Buddha-slaying sword's power had increased drastically, but as a natural variant demon king, her life force was far more abundant than an elderly human cultivator. Actually, the only time Little Anne had truly used the Buddha-slaying sword after undergoing the tribulation was against the lords of Yin and Yang. Only when he stabbed Madame Teng did he understand that the strike was not enough to claim her life, which was why he did not draw it immediately. Between Li Qingshan and the Banyan Tree King, one possessed great instincts for battle, while the other possessed great wisdom. In the past, they had only been shocked by the startling strike, which was why they had overlooked this. Now that Little Anne had reminded them, they immediately understood. They were both stunned. Li Qingshan felt some lingering fear. In the situation back then, if Madame Ting had struggled a little longer, he would not have been able to shatter the Mist Province's cauldron. If she had blown up her demon core out of fury and hatred, then it would not be as simple as the plan failing. As it turned out, none of this went according to plan. Little Anne said, "Senior Banyan Tree King, although my strike heavily injured her, the true fatal strike was your determination." Chapter 984. Li Qingshan looked at Little Anne in surprise. The blurry feeling became extremely clear. She had indeed changed. In the past, Little Anne would never do these unnecessary things, much less pay attention to the grievances and conflicts of others. If the divine nun of the South Sea was still alive, she should be smiling happily. The Banyan Tree King was stunned for a while before suddenly letting out a long sigh. His eyes became rather moist, but there was actually a hint of a relieved smile on his face. "Fellow Little Anne, thank you for your guidance. Can I ask you to help me out again?" With his sleeves fluttering, the Banyan Tree King bowed deeply towards Little Anne. Even his long beard reached the ground. Li Qingshan was surprised. Just who in the world could receive a bow like that from the Banyan Tree King? However, Little Anne accepted it calmly. She did not mind at all. With a wave of her hand, she said, "There's no need to be so polite, Senior. I'm not helping you." "Oi, girl, that's no good." Li Qingshan was even more surprised. In the past, Little Anne was emotionless, but she was flawless when it came to etiquette. Even Feng Shiwu praised her. She would never behave so rudely. Xiaoan hummed in acknowledgement, but he didn't seem too convinced. "Qingshan, there's no need to say anything more. I'm the one who asked to be humiliated." The Banyan Tree King waved his hand at Li Qingshan and smiled bitterly. Little Anne glanced at Li Qingshan, as if she was saying, "What do you think?" Li Qingshan shrugged and laid out his hands. All right. A skull prayer bead on Little Anne's wrist turned into a skull. It opened its mouth and spat out a ball of samdi flames of white bone, burning silently. Her seaweed-like hair drifted about as two specks of golden light shone in her clear eyes. She murmured, "White bone and great beauty, the cycle of life and death." The almost transparent samdi flames of white bone gradually materialized. Madame Teng's figure faded in and out. Her eyes were firmly shut as despair froze on her face. Li Qingshan's eyes widened. "You can do that," Little Anne said. "I've already said that my sword strike wasn't enough to sever her life force. It was her own mind that was thrown into chaos, causing her to suffer from chi deviation. If I ignore it, she'll definitely die. So that sword of yours actually saved her." Li Qingshan felt that it was unimaginable. Little Anne had brought him too many surprises today. Since white bones can transform into beautiful faces, the sword that kills can also save people. Little Anne's white robes fluttered in the wind. There was a trace of benevolence in her calm demeanor. She had a kind of beauty that could topple the world. This was a brand new understanding of the path of white bone and great beauty after balancing the Buddhist and demonic powers. Although she did not know whether she had taken the wrong path or not, the white bone bodhisattva's original intentions were probably not to kill. Madame Teng's figure gradually solidified, but she still could not stabilize it. To little Anne, this was the first time she had done something like this. Li Qingshan saw that the banyan tree king's face was filled with concern. His vast and distant aura was greatly reduced, making him seem even more like a mortal than before. He thought to himself, this person must really be an old tree that's sprouting new buds, his fallen in love. Qingshan, help me. Little Anne flipped her left hand and held a phoenix feather between her fingers, thrusting it towards Madame Teng's forehead. Coming. Li Qingshan grabbed her hand and circulated the phoenix nirvana scripture with all his might. The phoenix feather glowed with resplendent light, transforming into a stream of light and entering Madame Teng's body. Little Anne let out a sigh of relief. Madame Teng's figure stabilized. She was barely breathing, and she fell unconscious in the banyan tree king's embrace. The banyan tree king thanked Little Anne again. Little Anne said, she is severely injured, and both her body and mind are in a mess. Senior, please take care of yourself. The banyan tree king nodded slightly, closed his eyes, and lowered his head to touch Madame Teng's forehead. The heart of the tree above him glowed with 7-colored light. Wow! Li Qingshan's eyes widened. He saw the banyan tree king's lush beard withering, revealing his true appearance. Li Qingshan was about to speak, but the banyan tree king waved his sleeve without raising his head. The surrounding scene twisted and changed, and they were teleported out. However, he heard Little Anne say 2 words, give up. Li Qingshan waited in Towering City for a while before Little Anne was teleported to his side. Little Anne lowered her head and didn't speak. What's wrong? Li Qingshan asked. If you want to scold me, then go ahead. Little Anne seemed like she was ready to die. Why would I scold you? Li Qingshan smiled. Really? Little Anne blinked her eyes and asked carefully. Haha, what nonsense are you talking about? Li Qingshan pulled Little Anne into his arms as he laughed aloud. He rubbed her hair and gave her a thumbs up. Moreover, you've done this extremely beautifully. This is the first time I've seen this old man show an expression like that, and what is like. I really didn't expect it. You don't blame me for acting on my own. My Little Anne has already grown up. It's time for her to have her own opinions. Li Qingshan did not like Madame Teng, but it was not to the point where he wanted to kill her. As a result, he wanted to confirm the banyan tree king's thoughts again before he attacked the Mist Province cauldron. However, since the banyan tree king had made up his mind, there was nothing he could say. It would be for the best of both worlds in the end. What comforted him even more was Little Anne's changes. He had never agreed with the White Bone Bodhisattva's terrorist ideology, nor did he want Little Anne to become a second White Bone Bodhisattva. I just pity her a little. Little Anne hugged Li Qingshan gently and gazed at the withered vines around the banyan tree king. She guaranteed, I definitely won't be as willful as her. I already told you not to bring things in recklessly. I'm not as great and compassionate as the banyan tree king. You know that I'm very selfish and greedy. I don't want to let go of what I have in my hands. If you want to go somewhere without me, I definitely won't let you go. Li Qingshan smiled. Yeah, I'll definitely take you beyond the 9 heavens. The corner of Little Anne's lips curled up as she gazed at Li Qingshan deeply. If I become an obstacle to you one day, I definitely won't make things difficult for you. Then please take care of me, Sir Little Anne. Li Qingshan laughed aloud. If he did not have her by his side, what was the point even if he went beyond the 9 heavens? He might as well hold on to his dreams and die in battle somewhere. At this moment, the withered vines shone with golden light again, gradually recovering their vitality. Oh right, why did you stay behind earlier? Li Qingshan asked. I wanted to ask him a question, said Little Anne. What question? If I had to choose again, how would I choose? You really know how to get to the bottom of things. But it was a good question. How did he answer? He thought about it for a long time, but he did not answer. Instead, he asked me a question. Really? What did he ask you? Li Qingshan could not guess what the banyan tree king was thinking. Did he change his mind, or did his heart remain the same, or did he not have an answer? He asked me, "Do you think she will forgive me?" Li Qingshan laughed aloud. He simply could not imagine the expression on the banyan tree king's face at that time. Then how did you answer? What do you think? I can't guess. But if it were me, even if I don't take revenge, I will definitely remember him for life. Then I'll have to be careful not to offend a narrow-minded person like you. You dare say that I'm narrow-minded? I'll remember this sentence. Li Qingshan glared at him, pretending to be angry. Oh no. Little Anne covered her mouth and snickered. Numerous sunflowers bloomed brilliantly like little suns, illuminating the dark canopy of the tree. Chapter 985. A hawk's cry rang through the air. Banyan Tree King, you're one of the 10 demon kings, yet you dare to destroy the 9 cauldrons. Do you know that the laws of the nation are merciless? What a powerful aura. Li Qingshan shivered inside and raised his head. A man in black clothes stood with his arms behind his back, standing high up in the air. The atmospheric winds surged with his voice, spreading through the sea of trees for thousands of kilometers. It was like the might of the heavens had descended upon the world. His appearance was valiant and extraordinary. His long, golden-brown hair draped behind him meticulously, and his hooked nose made him even more stern. However, the thing that stood out the most was his eyes. Outside his dark irises was a faint, golden ring, as if they could see through everything. The hawk god has graced us with his presence. Please forgive me for not going out to welcome you, the Banyan Tree King replied modestly. His voice was tremendous, echoing through the surroundings. He did not lose any of the limelight at all. Sure enough, Li Qingshan thought, there are not a lot of people in the world who are bold enough to speak to the Banyan Tree King like that. Apart from the legendary hawk god that protects the kingdom, there is no one else with such bearing and presence. It's the bird girl's bird father. Little Anne communicated. Li Qingshan burst into laughter. He felt very comforted inside. The little girl's sense of humor had grown after undergoing the tribulation. In that moment, a pair of hawk eyes pierced through the leaves and landed on him. It was like a blade. There were not a lot of people in the world who were bold enough to laugh when the hawk god and the tree god spoke. Subordinate Li Qingshan greets Sir Hawk God. Li Qingshan's smile vanished. He recalled his identity as a White Hawk commander and clasped his hands at the horizon, meeting the Hawkeyes without any fear at all. Although he was in charge of the renowned Hawkwolf Guard and maintained the laws of the Great Shia Empire, the Hawk God was still a form of respect at the end of the day. He was not a true god. However, he had even seen demon god Cheongchi, so he obviously did not fear a demon king, no matter how holy and powerful this demon king was. Savage King Li Qingshan. The eagle deity's eyes narrowed, and Li Qingshan felt the pressure on him increase. He thought to himself, in my entire life, if we were to talk about the word majesty, this person is definitely number 1. This is probably not just because of his temperament, but also the majesty of the laws of Great Shia. As the saying goes, godly might is like a prison. Perhaps this is the origin of his name, Eagle Deity. Even though Cheongchi was far more powerful than the eagle god, it was only an incarnation, and its aura was astonishingly powerful, but it had nothing to do with majesty. Instead, it was sly and playful. Lord Eagle God recognizes me? Li Qingshan was slightly surprised. Then, he smiled and said, however, the title of King of Savages is too unpleasant. I have already resigned. The hawk god looked at him deeply, as if he didn't want to waste any more time with a small fry like him. However, his gaze lingered on Little Anne for a moment, and there was a hint of surprise in his eyes. After undergoing the 3rd heavenly tribulation, he was basically at the apex of the 9 provinces. With his cultivation at such a young age, he could no longer be described as a genius. Of course, he never would have imagined that the person who personally destroyed the Mist Province cauldron would be this small fry. This was also the effect that Li Qingshan wanted. No matter how much this Lord Eagle God liked him anyway, it was impossible for him to take him in as a son-in-law. He was fine as long as he was not viewed as an enemy. "You've come from afar, so why don't you pay a visit to my towering city?" asked the Banyan Tree King. "There's no need." "Do you admit to destroying the 9 cauldrons?" asked the Hawk God. "I do," said the Banyan Tree King. "From today onwards, you will be stripped of your position as one of the 10 demon kings, and you will be placed at the top of the wanted list of the Ministry of Justice. The Hawkwolf Guard will do everything in their power to capture you. If you put up any resistance, you will be executed on the spot." Li Qingshan found this to be more and more strange the more he listened. At this point, why would the Banyan Tree King still care about the position of one of the 10 demon kings, let alone the fact that he was wanted by some bullshit Ministry of Justice? The Hawkwolf Guard was renowned throughout the world, but capturing or killing him was basically wishful thinking. Was there something wrong with this protector hawk god? Before he knew it, the supreme masters and tremendous organizations in his heart were no longer as unreachable as before. He could not treat them lightly anymore. "All those who make friends with you are the enemies of Great Shia." When the hawk god reached there, he glanced at Li Qingshan again. He had rushed over in a hurry, so he had no idea that the Banyan Tree King had traveled all the way to welcome Li Qingshan, welcoming him into Towering City. He wondered about the relationship between Li Qingshan and the Banyan Tree King. "Then Great Shia has far too many enemies. Please reconsider, fellow." The Banyan Tree King smiled. "What a Banyan Tree King! So much for me treating you as a great senior, you've actually broken the law. My Hawkwolf Guard will never forgive you." Li Qingshan yelled out furiously as if he had not vented his anger. He stomped on the branch a few more times to draw a clear line between them. The corner of the hawk god's eye twitched, and he was immediately unable to continue with what he was about to say. He had seen people seeking death, but never had he seen someone seeking death like this. He thought the same as Li Qingshan earlier. Is there something wrong with this bastard's head? Little and smiled. He was truly an expert at ruining the atmosphere. He could already tell that the hawk god had come this time purely for a stroll, to express that the Great Shia Empire would never tolerate something like this. However, if he wanted to capture or kill the Banyan Tree King, probably even he did not have the ambition to do so. "Sigh, you've been betrayed so quickly. If that's the case, then please take action." The Banyan Tree King sighed with a smile. "Wind, rise." The hawk god spread his arms like a hawk spreading its wings. The atmospheric winds in a range of 500 kilometers immediately became violent. With another powerful swing, it swept down from the sky, and a few clouds were immediately torn to pieces. If it were a regular forest, it would have been reduced to a barren land immediately. Even the roots buried deep underground would have been torn apart, losing all life. "It really is impressive," Li Qingshan thought. The atmospheric winds and geomagnetism basically drew up the upper and lower boundaries of this world. To be able to control the atmospheric winds so easily, the hawk god had already reached the peak of the 3rd heavenly tribulation. He was close to ascending. He focused on the scene of the battle between the 2 10 demon kings in preparation for the Ink Sea dragon slaying. The Banyan Tree King held up a light green canopy. The moment the atmospheric winds entered the canopy, they immediately lost their sharpness and became ordinary gales. The strong gales stirred up waves in the sea of trees. Thousands of banyan trees swayed, forming a vigorous and impassioned tune. Li Qingshan stepped on a branch and looked into the distance. The wind and clouds were raging, and the strong auras in the sea of trees were ready to be released. Although the battle between the hawk god and the Banyan Tree King was magnificent and impressive, it did not feel like a battle to the death. He thought, since they're going to go through the motions, I'll go along with them to avoid trouble in the future. "Lord Eagle God, let me lend you a hand." Li Qingshan bellowed out and unleashed his great strength as a golden core cultivator as well as the superb acting skills he had honed over many years. He launched a barrage of attacks at the Banyan Tree King, personally demonstrating the meaning of an ant trying to shake a tree. With his interference, the great show of a battle between rulers came to an end very quickly. However, before the hawk god took off, he said, "Pass on my orders." The White Hawk commander of the South Sea Commandery, Li Qingshan, deserves praise for his loyalty and his service as a protector. He will be transferred to the Dragon Province immediately. No mistakes are allowed. Chapter 986. Alright, but you have to admit that my acting in the past was pretty good. Li Qingshan raised his index finger and sighed. Sure enough, modesty makes people improve, while arrogance makes people fall back. However, he was not worried at all. He was no longer the Li Qingshan of the past. There was no need for him to act out every single act carefully, nor was there any need for him to care so much. As for when he would go to the Dragon Province, or even whether he would go to the Dragon Province, it was not up to the Hawk God to decide. Little An nodded with a smile. But why does the mighty Hawk God have to travel such a great distance just to go through the motions? Li Qingshan was rather confused. He had put on an act for the Hawk God to avoid some unnecessary trouble, but who was the Hawk God putting on an act for? Because he's the protector Hawk God. As long as the Great Xia Empire exists, he will continue to protect it, the great banyan tree's voice rang out. I see. In the past, I thought the title of the protector Hawk God was mighty and domineering, but why do I feel like it's just a tough job now? Li Qingshan said. As his cultivation constantly increased, his horizons broadened. When he heard the Golden Cicada Spirit King say the 9 provinces are like a well a few decades ago, he still found it very shocking. Only now did he truly understand. But since the cage has been broken, the bird is free, the Banyan Tree King said leisurely. Freedom. How high can one fly to be considered as true freedom? It's a pity that you'll never have that freedom. Birds have their own freedom, and trees have their own freedom. To a tree, having a place to grow in peace without being cut down is already freedom. Fair enough. Oh right. Have you succeeded yet? Li Qingshan smiled ambiguously. This is only the first step. I still need a long time to get used to it. I believe I'll succeed one day, said the Banyan Tree King. You know what I'm asking. Li Qingshan was interested in gossip. About that, actually, it's useless for you to ask Little An about this kind of thing. She's just a little girl, what would she know? I'm the one who's experienced and knowledgeable. In short, just do what you need to do. Don't think too much, Qingshan. I'm afraid that Senior needs to rest for a while before he can condense the wisdom fruit. Why don't you take a look at the Shadow Palace first? Little An tugged on Li Qingshan's sleeve, interrupting him. Sure. Li Qingshan agreed casually. When he came back to his senses, he asked, do you think I'm wrong? That's right. Little An nodded seriously. Go quickly. There are many things waiting for you to fix in the Shadow Palace. Damned girl, how dare you mock me? Li Qingshan suddenly missed the Little An who always looked at him with eyes full of worship. But now, there was a rich emotion in those eyes, and it could see into his heart even more than the eagle gods. The layer of beauty on the white bones was no longer just an empty skin bag. I'm not a little girl. Alright, I'll be right back. Li Qingshan pinched her cheek before turning around and flying off. Speaking of which, he had basically been like an ascetic monk for the past 20 years. Afterwards, there were consecutive battles and intense labor like destroying the Mist Province cauldron. Meeting Gong Yuan was rather interesting to both of them, but it was exactly because of this interest that he was unable to do whatever he wanted. As soon as he thought of the Shadow Palace and the Night Roamers, he even became a little excited. Palace Master Yi, I've come for the appointment. Why do you seem like you've come to visit a brothel? Yi Weiyang's face was covered by a black veil, only revealing a pair of eyes. She studied Li Qingshan. The impression that the battle in the demon cavern had left on her was far too deep. She struggled to connect the two images together. Then I'd like to pick a lead card. Li Qingshan laughed aloud. He, then come at me. With a flash, Yi Weiyang vanished into the sea of trees. Li Qingshan followed close behind. Before him, a beautiful figure moved through the jungle, struggling to grasp her aura. In the deep, complicated forest, he was unable to unfurl his wings and fly at full speed either. Every time he approached her, the distance would immediately widen. And, Yi Weiyang did not advance in a straight line. Instead, she turned left and right randomly. She seemed to be flirting with him. As a result, Li Qingshan just gave up on the chase. What, you're not going to pick a lead card? Yi Weiyang smiled. A lead card that I can't even see. It's fine if I don't pick one, just in case I get tricked. Li Qingshan replied with a smile. His eyes remained clear the entire time. After experiencing so many things over the past few decades, he was no longer the bumpkin who had just emerged from a small mountain village and fell in love with Jiyu Yangying at first sight and was stunned by her beauty. His main objective for visiting the Shadow Palace was not to satisfy his desires, but to put an end to it. Yi Wei-yang suddenly stopped and parted the layers of leaves. She said, "Please." A city constructed between huge trees appeared before Li Qingshan. It was hundreds or thousands of times larger than the cobweb city Xinyan had seen in the past. Thousands of Yi Mingzhu trees shone with a faint, silver luster. The shadows of the trees crisscrossed as thick mist drifted beneath the trees. It seemed both gloomy and glorious. Countless night roamers strolled through it. It was not like he had imagined it to be, a harsh training ground for assassins. Instead, it gave off a sense of art everywhere. However, the many hidden sentry posts could not escape Li Qingshan's eyes. As it seemed, the night roamers had not let down their guard just because they were in the territory of Towering City. They maintained an almost instinctive sense of caution. However, under the Shadow Queen's lead, the journey was smooth and unobstructed. They arrived at the center of the Shadow Palace and saw Yi Liusu and her sisters very soon. He knew that they were doing quite well in the Shadow Palace. After all, with their cultivations at the Second Heavenly Tribulation, they could be regarded as upper-middle echelons in any organization across the 9 provinces. Even if there were some internal strife, it would be very difficult to directly affect them. The rich and complete cultivation system that the Shadow Palace had inherited from the ancient Divine Kingdom provided them with great assistance. Over the past 2 decades, they had spent most of their time on cultivation. Yi Liusu's talent had always been the best, and she had received special treatment from Yi Wei-yang, who had given her the greatest support. She had improved the most too, and she had a very good chance at succeeding as the Shadow Queen. However, the one who worked the hardest was not her or Yi Liuxing, but the one with the worst talent and the laziest, Yi Liubo. Her bearing had changed drastically as a result. She seemed like a completely different person. Li Qingshan nodded in relief. He had basically lived up to their friendship by bringing them to their current state during this journey. However, it was a pity that this was all they could do. Dong, dong, dong. The knocking on the door echoed in the dark room. Li Qingshan opened his eyes and was just about to rise from the entanglement of a pair of arms when they wrapped around him tightly. "Take me with you," Yi Liubo said. Li Qingshan kissed her forehead gently and caressed her belly. "Take good care of our child." "Will there really be one?" Yi Liubo was rather confused. "There definitely will be one this time. I promise," Li Qingshan said. With the phoenix fire as a guarantee, he had already planted that bit of life. He had no idea what kind of fruit it would bear in the future, but he was destined to never be a good father. "The banquet is about to begin." Yi Wei-yang's urging voice rang out from outside the door. Li Qingshan could already sense the tremendous auras gathering in Towering City 1,000 kilometers away. Chapter 987. Basically all the diamonds and other human kings of the Mist Province had rushed over from all directions, gathering in Towering City to congratulate the Banyan Tree King on becoming the god of the Mist Province. The aura they naturally gave off gathered into a tremendous pressure. Existences who had not undergone the Third Heavenly Tribulation could not even approach it. As for the host, the Banyan Tree King had yet to appear. Some guests conversed in groups of 2 or 3, while others sat in a corner by themselves, standing out from the crowd. It had to be mentioned that compared to the other human kings, the demon kings in human form seemed more like humans. However, they only seemed like humans. Their primitive, wild aura could not be hidden no matter what. When they were happy, they beamed with delight, but when they were angry, they bared their teeth and glared at each other. Their voices were so loud that they could be heard from several hundred kilometers away. Even human cultivators were not all harmonious, let alone the diamonds and other humans of the various races. Murderousness would erupt from time to time. If it were not for the fact that this was Towering City, several battles might have already broken out. As for the only human, Little Anne, he naturally became the most eye-catching person. Her eyes were lowered as she sat on a banyan tree leaf that resembled a small boat. She held a string of skull prayer beads in her left hand and formed a Buddhist seal with her right hand as she chanted a scripture softly. The little phoenix perched on her shoulder obediently as if he was listening attentively. Both of them had a kind of otherworldly beauty, creating an ethereal and tranquil atmosphere. Even the non-human races could clearly feel it, so they didn't rashly come to disturb them. However, there were many topics of discussion. Why are there humans here? A skinny man who seemed to be forged from scarlet bronze frowned. He was a member of the metal diamonds of the 7 god races. They possessed indestructible bodies, but they just happened to be excellent materials for forging weapons. Countless metal diamonds had died to human cauldrons, so they developed a deep grudge. Is that a phoenix? It really is as magnificent as the legends say, a woman said in envy. Her voice was pleasant, and she was petite. Her head was covered in fine, verdant feathers. Clearly, she was a feathered demon king. Little Phoenix's heart was not on the scripture at all. When he heard this praise, he couldn't help but raise his head proudly and was about to sing a few times. Little Anne glanced at him faintly and he immediately retracted his wings and hung his head down dejectedly. Little Anne was well aware of Little Phoenix's naughtiness and mischievousness. If he left it alone, it would definitely cause trouble. These days, Little Phoenix had been plucked by her for various reasons, so he was very well behaved. She didn't want to cause trouble, but trouble came knocking on her door. I am young Master Silver Snake. May I know your name? A handsome, feminine, pale-faced scholar flashed over to the branch where Little Anne was and bowed. His words and actions were refined, but his face had an undisguised covetous look. That's none of your business. Little Phoenix raised his head, once again displaying the results of Li Qingshan's good education. The young Master Silver Snake was taken aback. He never thought that a bird that seemed like a phoenix would speak so vulgarly. He smiled. How bold of you. You're just a mere demon commander, yet you're standing above us. That's far too rude of you. Come on down and let's have a chat. He extended his hand towards the little phoenix. He extended his arm and grabbed Xiaoan's shoulder. Hurry up and beat him up. Little Anne stopped chanting and said, Okay. Little Phoenix was overjoyed. He spread his wings, and with a phoenix cry, he pounced at young Master Silver Snake. Young Master Silver Snake was shocked. He didn't expect a demon commander to have such strength. His speed was even more astonishing. Before he could react, he was thrown off the tree. The demon kings were bored from waiting. Seeing this scene, they immediately cheered. However, to their surprise, although Little Phoenix was at a disadvantage in the beginning due to his lack of battle experience, being injured was nothing to him. Instead, it stimulated his passion for battle. The more he fought, the more courageous he became. After a while, young Master Silver Snake actually couldn't hold on any longer. Little Phoenix turned into a beam of light. Relying on his speed, he flew up and down, using his wings to beat young Master Silver Snake's face. As he beat, he scolded, "That's what you get for being cheap. That's what you get for being cheap." The Demon King's cheers became louder and louder. Mocking laughter rose one after another. Young Master Silver Snake flew into a rage out of humiliation. Killing intent surged in his eyes. With a flip, he turned into a 200-jong-long silver snake. He opened his huge mouth and tried to swallow Little Phoenix. Little Phoenix let out a phoenix cry. His body suddenly expanded in the wind, and his wingspan reached 300 jong. Although he was much smaller than the silver snake, he emitted an overwhelming light. With a gentle flap of his wings, he arrived above the silver snake. His phoenix claws easily pierced through the silver scales and grabbed onto the snake's spine. Then, he flew into the sky. The silver snake writhed violently, but it couldn't break free. Blood rained down like rain. It felt an instinctive fear, and it couldn't even use 30% of its strength. Generally, the demon race was at their strongest when they transformed into their original form. It was fine if he didn't transform into his original form, but once he did, he was greatly restrained. It was as if he had returned to the desolate era, when the divine bird hunted. Even if there was a big realm difference, he could still dominate it. Little Phoenix's elegant phoenix eyes stared coldly at the silver snake under his claws. His sharp phoenix beak fiercely pecked at the top of the snake's head. Everyone could see that if this peck landed, the silver snake's head would definitely be smashed. Even if it didn't die, it would lose half of its life. It was supposed to be a good show, but it suddenly turned into a life and death battle. They all shouted, "Stop! This is towering Sky City." Little Phoenix's killing intent rose, but he didn't care. At this moment, a voice sounded, "Stinking brat, come over here." Little Phoenix blinked and threw away the silver snake under his claws. He turned around and flew towards the forest. His figure shrank rapidly and turned into a little child again. He threw himself into Li Qingshan's arms and complained, "Big Daddy, where did you go to play? You didn't even bring me along." "I went to give birth to a little brother for you." Li Qingshan smiled. "But I like little girls." Little Phoenix's eyes widened. Li Qingshan was stunned. He didn't expect him to have such ambition at such a young age. He patted his head and said meaningfully, "Then it depends on your fate. You should work harder in the Shadow Palace." Yi Weiyang smiled. Compared to that ghost shadow, she was more interested in Li Qingshan's bloodline. Then forget it. There were only a handful of demon kings and other human kings who had seen Li Qingshan before. They were all surprised by this. The divine bird phoenix actually had a human father. Just what was going on? And, this human was clearly only at the second heavenly tribulation, yet he could speak and laugh with the Shadow Queen as equals. It was unbelievable. "Fellow Yi, who is he?" The golden demon human king asked with a frown. He lived in the mountains to the northwest, so he did not know Li Qingshan. Savage. "Oh, wait, it's the White Hawk commander, Li Qingshan," Yi Weiyang introduced. The Hawkwolf Guard. Under everyone's gazes, Li Qingshan immediately felt the pressure on him increase. Apart from the giant Lumberkin King and the others he had seen on the way here, the other demon kings and other human kings all showed contempt and hostility. In just a few short days, the entire world had learnt that the Lord of the Hawkwolf Guard, the Hawk God, had come to declare war against the Banyan Tree King. He was 10 times, 100 times more despicable than regular humans. "What are you blabbering about, you old hag? Who's the White Hawk commander? Don't you know I'm about to be promoted?" Li Qingshan shot a glance at Yi Weiyang. He had already grown accustomed to this. Compared to being surrounded by 7 demon kings in the 12 citadel demon formation of the ominous, this was nothing. "You really are a lackey of the Empire. How dare you come to Towering City and die?" The golden demon human king said coldly. "And this is?" Li Qingshan asked again. The golden demon human king, Tonggang, "Heh, you'll die from excessive ejaculation." Li Qingshan began to mock him. The little phoenix focused on learning. The golden demon human king cut right to the chase. He threw a punch at Li Qingshan's chest without any prior signs. There was only tough killing intent. He saw how Li Qingshan did not move at all, so he thought he had failed to react in time, which made him even more scornful. With a bang, a wave of air surged out, turning into a fierce gale that swept across thousands of kilometers. There was no gutting as expected. Instead, the golden demon human king's arm produced the sound of twisting metal. Li Qingshan smiled and did not budge at all. The mutant kings and demon kings all widened their eyes. They all saw it extremely clearly. The golden demon human king's punch was not his full strength, but he definitely did not purposefully hold back either. Even demon kings with tough bodies could not take it head-on. Not only did he need great defenses, but he also needed overwhelming strength to achieve something like that. What was even stranger was that Li Qingshan did not even give off an aura. Only Yi Weiyang noticed that a patch of skin on Li Qingshan's chest had turned a faint green. It was the newest ability of the Ox Demon transformation. The Ox Demon forges its hide. Not only did the Ox Demon forges its hide possess startling defenses, but it also shared the same origin as the Ox Demon's other ability, the Strength of the Earth. It did not require demon chi to support it, so it had already replaced the Spirit Turtle's Profound Shell as his greatest defensive ability. The golden demon human king immediately calmed down. He thought, how dare this lackey of the empire be so careless? I'll show you the power of golden demon humans. Immediately, his fist turned into a drill, pressing down as hard as he could. It began to spin madly and shone with golden light. Li Qingshan raised an eyebrow. He felt a piercing pain on his skin. If he let him drill a few more times, he really would not be able to endure it. As it seemed, the ox demon forges its hide was not invincible. If he continued to stand there without moving, he would end up ripping through his skin. As a result, he casually grabbed the drill. With a splash of sparks, the drill forcefully stopped spinning and twisted in his hand. Actually, what Li Qingshan did not know was that golden demon humans spent most of their time searching for precious metals underground. This drill was a special ability that they had trained since they were young, yet it actually failed to drill through his skin. This was already enough to terrify the golden demon human king. If this were a regular battle, the clash would be over in a split second. He would never have the opportunity to drill through slowly. I'll return a punch to you. Li Qingshan waved his fist and said casually. The golden demon human king's eyes revealed a hint of astonishment. Although there was no aura fluctuating on the fist, it gave him the feeling that the mountain was about to collapse and the earth was about to split. All right, Qingshan, stop joking around. The Banyan Tree King's voice sounded in towering Sky City. Is there a need to be so timely? Li Qingshan shook his head. He knew that the Banyan Tree King appeared at this time because he wanted him to use his strength to introduce himself. He wanted to let all the demon kings and mutant kings know that the name Li Qingshan was not a joke. Li Qingshan's fist descended and patted the golden demon human king's shoulder. You owe me a punch. I'll be waiting for you to hit me anytime. At this moment, the doors opened one by one. The Banyan Tree King and Madame Ting walked out together. All the demon kings and mutant kings were stunned. Chapter 988. The Banyan Tree King's beard fell off, revealing his true appearance. He was not as old as he had been imagined. He only seemed to be in his 40s. His long, dark, green hair that originally tangled with his beard had been combed back neatly, with natural curls. A pair of long eyebrows reached his temples, making him seem extraordinarily handsome. Even with some wrinkles, he still gave off a mature charm. Why aren't you saying anything? The Banyan Tree King asked with a smile. He subconsciously reached out to touch his beard, only realizing it was gone when he touched thin air. His voice was still ancient and profound, but it gave off a completely different feeling. Li Qingshan broke into laughter. He was nowhere near the erudite old man in his impression. He was clearly a handsome middle-aged man. If it were not for his gentle, deep eyes, he basically would have suspected he was a different person. Only then did the kings return to their senses. They all bowed and congratulated him. Turbulent, chaotic auras immediately gathered around the Banyan Tree King. Only now did Li Qingshan deeply sense that this was a colossal group of diamonds and other folk. As the Banyan Tree King became the god of the Mist Province, they became even more united. Tree King, who are they? The silver snake glanced at Li Qingshan and the others. When he recalled just now, he still felt lingering fear. After becoming a demon king, it had already been many years since he experienced the terror of being on the verge of death. I'm indebted to this young friend Qingshan. The Banyan Tree King's answer was simple and clear, but it left the kings very surprised. Every single person here had been indebted to the Banyan Tree King. It had always been the Banyan Tree King who showed favors to others, so why had they been indebted to Li Qingshan? Being indebted to me is being indebted to me. You can throw that punch back at me at any time. I definitely won't fight back, said the Golden Essence Human King. There's no need for that. It's just a joke. Li Qingshan smiled. So it was I who was rude to you. Please forgive me. Young Master Silver Snake immediately cupped his hands and apologized. Without waiting for Little Anne to respond, Madame Ting suddenly appeared in front of her and stuffed a golden fruit into her mouth. Thank you for saving my life. In a flash, he returned to the Banyan Tree King's side. However, he maintained a certain distance from the Banyan Tree King. He was no longer as close to him as before. Another life-saving grace. Under everyone's astonished gaze, Little nodded and said, "I'm ashamed to accept it. It would be impolite to refuse." At this moment, a streak of silver light shot through the sky. The Silver Dragon King flew over, hovering above the sea of trees. The King of Southern Yu led a group of great cultivators and drifted down, congratulating the Banyan Tree King. After exchanging a few pleasantries, he turned to Li Qingshan and said, "I heard you were going north to the Dragon Province. I've come this time to congratulate you, as well as to see you off." The surroundings fell silent. Just what had Li Qingshan done to earn such high regard from both the Banyan Tree King and the King of Southern Yu? Only Yi Weiyang and Yi Duanhai, who had witnessed the battle in person, just now understood that this respect was not excessive at all. "You're far too polite, Your Majesty." Li Qingshan smiled. "You don't want me to return to the Green Province, right?" The Green Province and the Mist Province were still in a state of war. With the King of Southern Yu acting so close to him, it was difficult to say how the King Chu Lai's estate would react. However, just like how one did not slap a smiling face, he could not blame him for being too polite. Not to mention, he had never planned on becoming involved in the war between the two provinces in the first place. Chu Lai King's thoughts were no longer important to him. "If you can stay in the Mist Province, that would be for the best. I'm always waiting for the position of honored guest." The King of Southern Yu was amiable. "Then I sure am flattered." Li Qingshan's voice carried a hint of mockery. "There's no need for that." The King of Southern Yu smiled, completely ignoring him. The others were confused. They had never thought of that. "It's quite late. Everyone, please get into character." The Banyan Tree King raised his hand. As a result, Li Qingshan stood beside the two kings who stood at the apex of the Mist Province and entered Towering City. A cultivation at the second heavenly tribulation just seemed rather strange. At the banquet, the King of Southern Yu suddenly pointed at a black mark on the Banyan Tree King's hand and asked, "What's this?" Li Qingshan immediately realized that this was originally a flaw in the Mist Province cauldron formed from the Demon Cauldron. As it seemed, becoming a god of the Mist Province came with a corresponding price. The Banyan Tree King gave a slight explanation, and the King of Southern Yu immediately said, "I'll wipe out the Demon Cauldron for you." How could the Demon Kings and other human kings just sit around? They all agreed, swearing to chase the demon folk out of the Mist Province. Only Madame Tung snorted and turned her head away, showing no respect to the Banyan Tree King at all. The situation became rather awkward. Li Qingshan understood. This banquet was not just a celebration. Instead, it was for the sake of unifying their thoughts and strength so that they could completely suppress the demon plague. He raised the cup in his hand. "May the two of you sweep away the demons and return peace to the Mist Province." The greatest banquet in the history of the Mist Province only lasted for half a day before the King of Southern Yu bid farewell and left. The Demon Kings and other human kings all rushed off to various places, and Towering City fell silent once more. Under the setting sun, a smear of red light flickered between the canopy and the sea of trees. Li Qingshan stood up and was about to bid farewell. "Looks like we still have a very long way to go," the Banyan Tree King said as he handed a fruit of wisdom that flickered with rainbow light to Li Qingshan. "It seems different from the one last time. This fruit has fused with the fragments I eliminated from the Mist Province cauldron. It has some other effects," said the Banyan Tree King. "I wonder if it'll taste good." The little phoenix gazed at the fruit of wisdom greedily. "You have an innate legacy, so you don't need my little cleverness." The Banyan Tree King patted his head. Li Qingshan accepted it carefully. A fruit of wisdom like that was enough to change the fate of a cultivator. He looked at Little and beside him. "Do you want to eat it? I heard you can only eat a single fruit of wisdom in your lifetime." "I'd like to wait until you become a god of the 9 provinces before condensing one for me, senior." "All right. If that day really does come, I'll definitely offer it up." The Banyan Tree King laughed aloud. "If I have the opportunity, I'll definitely retrieve the other 9 cauldrons for you." Li Qingshan clasped his hands. "Just let nature take its course. There's no need to force it." The Banyan Tree King nodded. Originally, this was something that even the 10 demon kings and lords of a province could not achieve, but the Banyan Tree King believed that as long as Li Qingshan continued to grow naturally, there would be a day when he could obtain the other 9 cauldrons with ease, even if it was the Dragon Province cauldron. When he first met Li Qingshan, he never thought it would be such a great fortuitous encounter. There's something else. You know our Yu Xin as well, so please help me look after her, said Li Qingshan. You're a step too late. She's already left the territory of the Mist Province yesterday, returning to the Green Province, said the Banyan Tree King. What? Li Qingshan was surprised. He had not specially gone to bid farewell to our Yu Xin because he wanted her to cultivate in peace in the south. He never thought she would beat him to it. I just happened to have something on my mind. My wife wants to visit the Green Province with you, so please take care of her. The Banyan Tree King raised his hand with a smile and pointed at Madame Teng beside him. Chapter 989. If I can't even see this, then I would have wasted the past 5,000 years. The Banyan Tree King smiled. So what if I can see it? Do you think I can't live without you? Madame Teng sneered. This is my fault. You should have gone out a long time ago. You would have realized that the world is so vast and not what you have seen in the past 5,000 years. I just happened to be the first tree you have met. It's not just a coincidence, it's fate. Fate. I am confident that few people in the 9 prefectures can compare to me in the Tao of divination, but I feel that fate is unpredictable and uncontrollable. It's fate. Madame Teng said stubbornly, it's fate that you want to kill me, and it's fate that I want to leave. There's no need for you to take care of me. I will walk my own path. As she spoke, towering Sky City shook and a loud rumbling sound came from below. The sun vines that coiled around the great banyan tree began to curl up and finally turned into a curved golden light that entered Madame Teng's body. The sunflower on her head suddenly shone brightly like the blazing sun before slowly shrinking and disappearing. It wasn't that plants couldn't move, but it was more suitable to cultivate if they stayed in one place. After the sun vines became a spirit monster, they didn't have to be parasitized to survive. They just had to pay a price. After completing the transformation, Madame Teng said hatefully, "Go be the god of the 9 prefectures, damn old man." With that, she turned into a golden light and shot towards the north. The Banyan Tree King gazed into the distance until Madame Teng completely disappeared in the horizon. Just now, he closed his eyes gently. Li Qingshan opened his mouth, but he didn't know what to say. He patted the Banyan Tree King's shoulder. Thinking about it, it was already rare that he didn't take revenge against such a resolute betrayal, let alone forgive. The Banyan Tree King's image had been changed for nothing. Please take care of me. The Banyan Tree King turned his head and sighed. Don't worry. Li Qingshan felt as if the positions of the Banyan Tree King and Madame Teng had been reversed. Moreover, Madame Teng's strength could be said to be the strongest among the demon kings. She didn't need anyone to take care of her. It's getting late. You should set off. Li Qingshan said, let's go back. He spread his phoenix wings and flew towards the north under the illumination of the setting sun. Little Anne and Little Phoenix followed closely behind. On the way, Li Qingshan said to Little Anne, you guessed wrong this time. You really haven't forgiven me, right? Do you think the phrase let nature take its course, don't force it was meant for you? Little Anne looked to the north. You mean? Li Qingshan was stunned. If my guess is correct, Madame Teng's trip to the north this time is most likely to find an opportunity to seize the Qingju cauldron. Little Anne looked back and smiled. Does she still want to stop the Tree King from becoming a god? Li Qingshan said in surprise. This seemed to be the only reasonable explanation, but it also seemed a little strange. Since the Tree King has already taken this step, he can no longer turn back. How can he be stopped? Little Anne shook his head slightly. You mean she did it to help him? Of course. This can't be. Li Qingshan felt that this was too unbelievable. Originally, Madame Teng was the staunchest opponent of the Banyan Tree King becoming a god. After suffering a fatal blow, she suddenly became a supporter. She didn't hesitate to take a great risk to seize the Qingju cauldron. Since she still believes that it's fate, Little Anne's voice was faint. "Heh, what fate? I think she is blinded by lard." Li Qingshan smiled disapprovingly. "That's true." They headed north until they reached the border of the two prefectures. Li Qingshan said quietly, "Qingju, I am back." There was a small city surrounded by mountains. The three words Qingyang City were deeply engraved on the city walls. They had already become rather mottled from the erosion of wind and rain. Under the setting sun, they seemed rather bleak. A locust landed on the point above the word city. Its emotionless compound eyes were reflected red by the setting sun. It paused for a moment before flapping its wings and taking off again, merging into the swarm of insects that filled the sky. "Sir, let's go. If we don't go now, it'll be too late." Frantic footsteps rang out everywhere in the government office. The advisor's call made everyone shiver. "What are you panicking for? It's just a few insects. Don't tell me they can eat us." Under the plaque hanging high above, a fat figure turned around and stared at the advisor with bulging eyes. He wore a set of large, red official robes. He was the district magistrate of Qingyang, Yi Dachuan. His hair and beard were white, and his face was covered in wrinkles. He already seemed rather old. However, having been an official for many years, he had developed a bearing of authority. He was not as miserable as when he first took office. "Sir, please stop putting on airs. Those locusts really can eat people." Ouch! A locust flew in from the swarm of insects outside and landed on the advisor's neck. He cried out and extended his hand in a hurry to catch it, but the locust crawled onto his face again. Smack! Yi Dachuan raised his fat hand and slapped the advisor across the face before patting him on the shoulder. He wiped his hand along the way. "You idiot! How could I not have made arrangements?" At this moment, a bell rang out from somewhere in the city. Yi Dachuan's face lit up. He wrapped the green veil he had prepared around his head and face and ordered loudly, "Go to the back and invite the madam and young miss. Don't worry about what you can't carry. We'll set off immediately." Several kilometers away, in the Iron Fist. The Iron Lion, Liu Hong, pulled back his fist and left behind a clear imprint of his fist on the metal bell before him. His hair and beard were all white, joining together. Although he was advanced in age, he seemed even more spirited than before. His first disciple, Wang Lei, praised behind him, "Master's martial arts have advanced again. It's all because of your junior brother's spiritual fruits." Liu Hong shook his head and glanced at his fist. The innate realm sure was wondrous, but unfortunately, this was as far as he could go. Junior brother is an important figure in the Clear River Prefecture. I heard that even our main sect master greets him when he sees him. Everything has been prepared. Once we reach the Clear River Prefecture, Master, you can spend your remaining years in peace. I still have a few more years to live. Looking at the situation in the world, who can spend their remaining years in peace? Just like what Wang Lei had said, a long group of people were already waiting outside. All of their heads were covered in gauze, and their eyes were covered too. Even their ears were plugged up to prevent the locusts from burrowing in. When Liu Hong emerged from the Iron Fist, the group fell silent. Despite Wang Lei's objections, Liu Hong insisted on riding at the front of the group, traveling out of the city slowly. They stopped at the entrance of the government office, and Yi Dachuan merged with them with his family and guards, making the group grow larger and larger. They advanced arduously through the swarming locusts. Liu Hong raised his head and looked around. He saw the dense swarm of locusts. The surrounding mountains had all become barren, let alone the fields and gardens. They had all become food for the locusts. The famine in the city had already lasted for a very long time. When he passed by an alleyway, he saw a few stray dogs gnawing on a starving corpse. He had already grown sick of this sight a long time ago. Suddenly, he began to miss the times of the past. Even when the Jianghu was filled with many dangers and battles to the death, it had never been so gloomy. The group's advance led to an uproar in the city. The wealthy families who had endured the famine until now all brought their most precious belongings with them. Even if they could still last for a very long time with the surplus of food in their homes, their minds would collapse first. This was not a regular plague of locusts. The rumor of locusts eating people had already spread for a very long time before the first locust arrived. No one knew when the insects that ate grass would become the legendary man-eating monsters. And, in the past few days in the city, many people had reported seeing a huge locust that specially hunted people at night, so their fear became heavier and heavier. Everyone believed that they would only be truly safe in Clear River City, and Liu Hong and Yi Dachuan's choices gave them even more confidence. "Master, what do we do?" Wang Lei urged his horse to travel with Liu Hong as he asked with a frown. "They're all from the same village. Let them follow us. Your junior brother has his own plans," Liu Hong said. At the end of the day, there were only a few people who could keep up with the group. The poor people who only had a pair of legs and were half dead from hunger were unable to keep up. However, this gave them an opportunity. They could rely on the food that the fleeing wealthy families had left behind to last a little longer. The group passed through the city gates in a grandiose manner, setting off towards the distant Clear River City. Liu Hong suddenly felt threatened. He looked back at the sky, but he was unable to see anything. "Master, what's wrong?" "Nothing. Let's hurry to Xiachuan village." Unbeknownst to Liu Hong, a locust was currently watching him from within the swarm of locusts. This locust seemed no different from regular locusts, but it did not go around eating like its own kind. Instead, it hovered in the air quietly, overlooking the entire Qingyang city. Faint demon qi revolved around it. Actually, Qingyang city was located in a remote location, and it was located on the outskirts of the boundless mountains, so it had not become the soaring locust king's target. The locust plague had only reached here very late. Within the locust plague of Qingyang city, there was only a single, weak clone that guided and controlled the entire swarm of locusts. Its objective was to plant enough eggs and provide a source of soldiers for the entire plague of locusts. At the same time, it would create a great famine and wipe out the source of soldiers of the humans. In terms of strength, this clone was not even the opponent of the innate master Liu Hong. It would probably struggle to deal with the master of the Iron Fist, Wang Lei. Myriad clones was an extremely terrifying innate ability, but there were many prerequisites for it. Moreover, with a tremendous advantage in numbers, it was very difficult to guarantee the quality. If it were like Li Qingshan's Water Mirror's image, where every clone possessed 30% of the original's battle prowess, the soaring Locust King would have been invincible a long time ago. Why would it still need to hide its original body? After the group had traveled far away from the city, the locust wrapped in faint demon qi suddenly swelled up. It was the size of a calf, and it swooped down with a flap of its wings. Below, a group of people were currently breaking down the door in an attempt to barge into the granary left behind by a wealthy family. A wave of madness swept over them, and they all turned around. They cried out in fright, "Giant locust!" The giant locust swept through the crowd in an arc before rushing back into the sky. It carried a skinny human in its 6 legs as its cries reached the sky. With a bite from its sharp mouth, the cries immediately vanished, turning into slurping and chewing sounds. Even the bones were chewed and swallowed. By the time it had swallowed everything, the giant locust had grown even larger. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.